All right, welcome to the advisory committee meeting of Thursday, November 6th. We have a pretty full agenda for the evening because we're going to discuss warrant article 10, the naming of the baseball diamond. We have a lengthy discussion, I believe, planned with many different competing motions on warrant article 8. Nuisance, which are regarding nuisance lighting. And then we have two items that came before us before that are back for our final say, I believe, warrant article 9 and warrant article 19 regarding the renter's handbook and the tabled resolution regarding President Trump. So I'm going to encourage people to try to be as concise as possible tonight because there's going to be a lot of discussion. And we're going to start, as always, with public comment. If there's any members of the public who wish to comment on any of the items before us tonight, drop your name in the chat and we'll call on you before we go to our main agenda. And seeing nothing, let's go to our first item of business, which is warrant article 10, the naming of the diamond. We have a subcommittee report.
Yes, Dennis, that would be from me.
Great.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
In recognition of the significant contributions former Brookline resident and baseball coach Joseph Campagna, who's present tonight, has made to youth baseball in Brookline, the petitioner of Article 10, Brookline resident Merrill Diamond, seeks the approval of town meeting to name the baseball diamond located at the northwest corner of Warren Field on Elliott Street, the Campagna Diamond. Pursuant to Article 6.8 of the town's general bylaws, the process for naming public facilities in Brookline requires the naming committee to review and report its recommendation on proposals for naming such facilities to town meeting. The committee's charge states that before making a recommendation on a proposal for the naming or renaming of a public facility, the committee will take into consideration a number of criteria, one of which is determining whether the naming subject is a person of excellent reputation and character who has set an example of outstanding citizenship and/or has made an exemplary contribution of time, service, or resources to or on behalf of the community. Mr. Campagna's nomination is made under this category, and the record of this matter supports his eligibility. Because a facility to be named is a playing field under the jurisdiction of the Park and Recreation Commission, the Commission also considered and voted on the proposal. The votes taken to date on the proposed naming are as follows. On March 11, 2025, the Park and Recreation Commission voted unanimously in favor of the proposed naming. On September 16, 2025, the Select Board voted unanimously to recommend favorable action on Article 10. On October 6, 2025, the Public Safety Subcommittee voted unanimously to recommend favorable action on warrant Article 10 as amended to strike the effective date. And on November 5, 2025, just yesterday, the Naming Committee voted unanimously to recommend naming the baseball diamond located at the northwest corner of Warren Field on Elliott Street, the Campagna Diamond, as described in the article. As a final note, the subject of a plaque to commemorate the naming arose several times, and I believe that Mr. Merrill, the petitioner, indicated an interest in financing a plaque at the Park and Recreation Commission meeting in March. Mr. Merrill may wish to comment on that, and if this is correct, I would suggest that he reach out to the Recreation Director to discuss arrangements, assuming that the article receives favorable action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As the petitioner, Mr. Diamond, do you have anything to add to that report?
No, other than I would be glad to pay for the plaque. And I think, as was discussed last night, probably spring, when baseball season starts, would be a great time for a dedication ceremony. The only thing I'll say, and I don't know if everybody has read the article. If they haven't, I'd be glad to try and plow my way through it. My vision isn't that good. But the only thing I would say is that this is one of the great honors of my life to propose this. Some of you may know me, some of you don't, but my career was spent building buildings. Joe's career was spent building people. And he's been a 35-year friend of mine. When my 10-year-old son, one of two, who played for Joe, when we first met, but he's an amazing character. He's taken little leaguers who, for the very first time in their lives, are learning that life isn't always fair. And they may not be the best player in the team, and they may play less than the better players, and that's how it is. But equally important, he's taught life lessons to older Brookline men and women who were juniors and seniors and about to go off into life and certainly weren't going to be playing professional baseball, but he guided them in terms of if they did have an interest in playing baseball, he guided them to the best academic career they could have and still play baseball. He's like a giant heart walking around. He has the most compassion for people I've ever met. He's done things that other coaches wouldn't have done. An example came up last night where somebody mentioned that her daughter wanted to play baseball, and even though she was an excellent softball player and could have been all state or something, she wanted to play for Joe, and Joe took her at a time when that wasn't being done, and he played her. He didn't overplay her, didn't underplay her, but like with everybody else, including his own sons, he was fair. And Joe has always been fair. And he's the other thing I would say is Brookline has some legends, and we're lucky to have Joe because Joe is a Brookline legend. And he's more than a Brookline legend. I'd say in Eastern Massachusetts and probably the state, Joe could be considered Mr. Baseball. So I'm urging everyone to vote for this or support this. And that's all I'll say, unless you want me to try and read the article.
Oh, no, thanks. That's the point of the subcommittee report. So let's move on to questions and or comments from the committee.
So far, we have no questions or comments. And so Janice, could you put your name in the chat next
Yeah.
time?
Yep,
Janice.
sorry. Actually, I just, the reason I put my hand up at all was because during the subcommittee hearing, Donnell made some really, I thought, very compassionate and excellent remarks. And I don't know if he is here right now, but I think the whole advisory committee would, would be impressed with the comments that he made.
Janice, he is not here. If you want to illuminate us, you're going to have to repeat them yourself.
Okay, well, in very shorthand, he definitely benefited from having Joe in his life, and that Joe really was such an extraordinary role model for him, his friends, and for many other people in Brookline. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Linda Olson-Pelkey.
Hi there. Yeah, my only question is, do we have other baseball diamonds that are named after other people? Or is this a first?
I do not know the answer to that question. Perhaps Mr. Campagna knows, having been a coach for 27 years.
Actually, speaking for someone who's been on the naming committee for a number of years, we have not, within the last decade or so, named, to my knowledge, a baseball diamond after any person.
Okay. Thank you.
If I may, it did receive unanimous approval from the Park and Recreation Commission I would also add that Mr. O'Neill's comments are repeated in the subcommittee report, which is posted with the agenda.
Thank you. Dennis?
All right, so let's take a motion from the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Dowdy. The motion of the subcommittee is to recommend favorable action on warrant Article 10 as amended.
Second.
Great,
Mhm.
thank you. We're going to go to a vote. I won't get to vote, but I will say that my son played Brookline Youth Baseball. Okay. Michael Berger. Maybe not here.
Not here yet.
Harry Boers.
Oh, actually, Michael is here, but he's muted.
Okay. All right, so Michael can unmute at some point. Cliff Brown.
Yes.
Anthony Buono.
Yes.
Elise Couture-Stone.
Not here.
She's
And
out of
John
town.
is indisposed and will be unavailable for a short period. He had an illness. Harry Friedman,
Yes.
David Mark Goldstein,
Yes.
Neil Gordon,
Yes.
Susan Granoff,
Yes.
Harry Grossman.
Yes, noting that it's cool that someone named Diamond is
Yes.
naming a diamond.
I'm glad somebody mentioned that.
Yeah.
Kelly Hardebeck.
If you don't like
Aye.
Completed Diamond, we could change it to Merrill Diamond. That'll be fine.
Kelly Hardebeck,
Yes.
Lisa Jonas,
Yes.
Janice Kahn,
Yes.
Brian Ladd,
Yes.
Alec Lovovitz,
Yes.
Carol Levin,
Yes.
Liz Linder,
Yes, and I want to underscore the diamond connection.
Pam Lodish,
Yes.
Jocelyn Murphy,
Yes.
Donnell O'Neill was
He is
not
not
here, we
here.
think. Linda Olson Pelkey,
Yes.
Fran Perler,
Yes.
David Pollock,
Yes.
Carlos Ridwejo,
Yes.
Margaret Robotham,
Yes.
Lee Selwyn,
Yes.
Christine Westfall,
Yes.
and Michael Berger. Did you come off mute? I don't hear him, so we will leave that as an
Sorry, I was having problems with my thing. Yes, that's a yes.
yes. Okay. So we unanimously recommend favorable action on warrant Article 10 as amended. Thank you so much to the subcommittee. Thank you, Mr. Diamond. Good luck, Mr. Campagna. And we're going to move on to warrant Article 8, which I believe is going to be shepherded by Carlos Ridwejo to help us navigate the myriad of competing motions and reports. So do you need the screen share, Carlos?
Just a quick thank you, and I'm signing off.
Oh,
All right,
thanks.
bye now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dennis. No, I don't think I need to screen share for
Okay.
now.
Okay, go ahead.
I didn't write this report, but I'll try my best to make it as quick as possible. This article, along with the one that we discussed on Tuesday, took us a while to several meetings to discuss. So we all appreciate the work of the subcommittee. Article 8 is the nuisance lighting, and we met a couple times. We met on September 29th and October 27th, and it has been significantly changed from what's in the warrant article. The warrant article proposes adding a subsection to Section 8 of the general bylaws, not the zoning bylaws, but the general bylaws, that would control lighting nuisance in the form of excessive glare and light trespass. Originally, it was intended to be a more comprehensive dark sky ordinance, but it has been narrowed down to nuisance lighting. The petitioners have mentioned that because of the advent of LED lighting, there's an increase of nuisance lightings due to low cost, ease of access, and ease of use, and then the different temperature lights that are available. And the nuisance bylaw would complement and be enforced by the building commissioner. Warrant Article 8 is proposed as an amendment in order to comprehensively regulate lighting nuisance rather than by zoning bylaw amendment where existing nuisance lighting would be grandfathered. One of the throughout the discussions, one of the big issues that we had were measurable standards. The subcommittee's recommendation recommends that there is a measurable standard rather than a subjective standard for at least for the part of nuisance of light trespass. Measurable standard is much more difficult with glare, defining what glare is and if it's in existence or not. So we proposed to head that way. Just as a note, when you do this as a zoning bylaw, it's much easier to regulate glare, since you are basically defining what kind of lamp fixture you can have, if it has cutoff, and the temperature, the amount of light that the lamp gives, etc. When it's done as a general bylaw, you are working with existing bylaw, so you're not defining what's there. You have to react to what's there. So that's really the big question that there is. One of the big questions that's out there. This also brings us to another aspect of it, which I think town council and Mr. Benka, if he's here, can discuss in a better way. But there's a question of the town council believes that this bylaw does not approach, or at least it creates a enforceability issues, right? Because general bylaws are not allowed to regulate something that has been already done through zoning. And according to town council, zoning is currently regulated through the signs and illumination and regulated facade alteration section of the zoning bylaw, even though in many cases there was no signage that was being illuminated, but rather facades or buildings or whatever it may be. Mr. Benka also had a opposite opinion, where it doesn't apply, the fact that it has been regulated, or since it hasn't been regulated directly, that it doesn't apply to there's no issue there. So, but I should let the lawyers describe this in a better way. And also, it depends. The legal aspects of it, in my opinion, the legal aspects of it are not as directly focused on the article, because it all depends if the district attorney that approves this article or not. So it's something that can be discussed much deeper if we would like to do that. The public comment, there was a lot of comment about what lighting nuisance was and how it affected people and how it affected also wildlife and other instances in town, and how right now it's not addressed or it cannot be enforced the same way that, for example, you can enforce a noise complaint. David Trebet has also proposed another amendment, or an amendment which would completely use or approach this bylaw in a different direction, but the subcommittee has not really looked into his amendment. So as currently amended, Article 8, what we've done through the subcommittee is that we've removed the commercial lighting from the article, so it only applies to outdoor lighting in residential areas. We've added standards for clearer definitions of glare and excessive light trespass. And we've also removed the rulemaking by the select board. So by that I mean that at one point this bylaw did not have any standards. They were going to be done at a later point, and they have now been. We're closer to having something that is much more clear. Also, light trespass is going to be measured at 5 feet or more beyond the property line. And because of concerns that the public had of removing lighting from walkways, public walkways and sidewalks, we've exempt the public light falling on public walkways from the article. The article only applies for lighting between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And porch lighting and entryway lights have been excluded, since sconces, for example, usually have bare bulbs in historic districts, and that would be hard to evaluate. We've also added the 14 days before a fine, allowed time to correct the violation from 14 days to 60 days. And the appeal decisions would go to the Board of Appeals rather than the Select Board, as originally was proposed. So with the standards, the subcommittee still feels, and this is why we had voted no action until today, until today's vote, to see how the quantitative measurability takes place. So as the town ordinance has a measurable standard for the building department that can administer with a meter, most subcommittee members requested that the same is done for lighting nuisance. So therefore, in response to the question, the petitioners noted that the common approach is to refer to a publication of the Illumination Engineers Society titled Lighting for People in Outdoor Environments, and is set to 50% above the recommendation for given situations. Let's see. We had the preference the regulating nighttime lighting rather than specific hours. Because it doesn't address any nuisance lighting in the long winter's hours, which is, for example, in the winter when darkness is well before 10 p.m. So that sort of wraps up most of the discussion that the subcommittee had. There have been several amendments, one of them which just came in a few minutes ago or an hour ago. One of the amendments has been done by Select Board Warren to define, let me see, that one was,
Actually, let me interrupt
yeah,
there if you don't mind. And let me outline what I think the current state of affairs is, and then we can go through with both you as from the subcommittee, as well as the combination of petitioners to kind of navigate how we want to clarify a few things. I believe that the short summary of what you outlined was that there was potential support from the subcommittee for the concept for this warrant article. However, there were significant concerns about measurability and some other definitional issues that you were hoping the petitioners would find an opportunity to address. We have several competing motions that have been presented, some of which have been unified now before us tonight, that may attempt to address those concerns from the subcommittee. That includes, I think, Mr. Warren's amendment, which I think has been subsumed by the latest draft that came tonight from the petitioners. We have a opinion from town council that this is all of questionable legality, so we'll hear from him. And then we have a proposed substitute motion that tries to take a slightly different approach. And I don't mean to imply slightly, I just try to take a different approach to addressing some of the concerns that have been raised. So if that is correct, and I saw a number of nods as I was speaking, what I would like to do is first give the initial set of petitioners an opportunity to explain how what they've sent us tonight addresses the concerns from the subcommittee. Then I'd like to hear from town council about his concerns. Then I'd like to hear from Mr. Trevette about his proposed changes, and then we'll have a bunch of back and forth discussion. Does that sound reasonable?
yes, and if Mr. Benka's here. because
Okay,
I
yes.
think
So
it's-
Mr. Benka
He
could
is-
speak at the same time as
he is
town
not-
as
He's not
town
here.
council
But his
if
memo
he's
is
here.
His
Okay.
memo was sent. It
Okay,
was posted.
Dennis,
So,
Dennis,
yes.
sorry, I think we should also hear from Paul Warren, why he's proposing this amendment.
Okay, I mean, that will, hopefully that will come out as part of the discussion from the petitioners, but if not, then obviously, yes, we will call upon Paul and he'll have an opportunity to speak. So, Mr. Titel, are you speaking on behalf of the
Am
petitioners?
indeed.
Great, go ahead.
So I'll tell you what, I have a set of slides that I don't need to go through in detail because Carlos really did a great job detailing a lot of what's happened, but I'd like to refer to them to make some key points. So if I could share.
Yes, 1 second. Take it away.
Excellent. Let me just get right here. Okay, and again, I'm not going to give this full talk.
Yeah, I have the mute button, so that's
Because-
pretty much it.
Okay, so the key point of this, just so you know, our motivation, it's really about providing a means for residents to effectively address lighting nuisances that negatively impact their health and well-being. And it's really about creating a pathway to empower residents to approach a neighbor to ask that problematic lighting be addressed. And if that conversation isn't fruitful, then they would escalate to the town. One of the things that was critical in all of our conversations with everybody was to make sure that this is something that the building department felt they could enforce. Any suggestion we ever received that implied that they couldn't was immediately dead on the table and wasn't considered. We only looked to changes that the building department could enforce. And it draws from Dark Sky Association standards and bylaws found throughout the Commonwealth. Again, it only applies to residential areas, does not apply to commercial businesses, doesn't apply to public monuments, doesn't apply to public property. It has the clear standards that that were asked for. A key thing that's important is this is not an anti-lighting bylaw. This doesn't ban bulbs. It is by definition, because it is a nuisance bylaw, it is complaint driven. If there's no complaint about a bulb never has to change. Again, it does allow for lighting that extends to public walkways, and it creates safe harbors for residents to easily comply if light has been deemed a nuisance. And those solutions can be as simple as changing the angle of a light, shielding a light, or replacing a bulb. Going through it, we don't need to talk about the problems, but again, this has all really come from the rise of LED lighting. That's why this is an issue now. LEDs are cheaper, which means people are buying more of them, and they're buying higher power LEDs, and they come in a whole wide range of temperatures, which means there's a lot more bluer light, which has become problematic. So there's just more light now than there's been in the past. Poor lighting can create safety issues where there's glare concerns, there's deep shadows. There's a misconception that more light is better. More light can actually be dangerous. These photos are an example of that, where you see there's somebody on the left side that's standing in the doorway of that gate that you can barely see because of that blinding light. You shield the light, and then that person is very visible. We spoke about the regulation landscape. I do want to highlight two things. One is we spoke about Dick Benka's letter. In it, he wrote, in the absence of evidence that the zoning bylaw comprehensively attacks light trespass, town meetings should decide what to do based off the substantive merits of the article. The big concern here is that it's unclear whether or not you can use signage rules to talk about a neighbor-to-neighbor lighting nuisance problem. And that's why we've gone down this route. Town Council, as Carlos mentioned, has asked the Attorney General's office whether the town could regulate glare and light trespass via general bylaw. To my understanding, we haven't heard back yet, but we may hear more later tonight. Again, we were asked to remove commercial, we did. We were asked to include standards for adjudication, we added them. We were told that the enforcement provisions were not sufficiently clear, we clarified them. We were told the correction period was too short, we extended it from 2 weeks to 2 months. We were asked to include, make it explicit that light trespass onto sidewalks be allowed. We've done that. And the whole time we've worked closely with the planning department to get to the amended bylaw that you have before you. So this is not new. We are not trailblazing. This has been done in 60 cities and towns in Massachusetts. They have some sort of outdoor lighting regulations. This is again about empowering residents to know that they have the town's back in case the neighbor-to-neighbor conversations fall through. We do ask for favorable action on this warrant article. I should add a couple of things. One, we have indeed woven in Paul Warren's amendment into what we presented today and what we put in the packet. We've seen the Rubenstein amendment. We are in favor of it. We would fold that into the final draft that we would put through, and assuming that you vote favorable action for warrant article 8, we would also ask that you vote favorable action for that. And I believe that is enough. I will stop sharing, and I hand the baton or answer some questions, which I prefer.
So thank you, Mr. Warren. Just do you have anything to add based on the comments about your amendment, and then we'll go on to the rest of my.
Yep. Thank you, Dennis. Paul Warren, member of the Select Board. I'll just explain what the amendment is. The petitioner didn't. I appreciate the petitioner's collaboration, and he's this whole group is an example of how it should be done, working with others to find consensus. So the amendment clarifies who has standing to bring forward a complaint by grounding the term neighbors in existing state law. The article referenced neighbors. It was undefined and informal. And so basically the amendment defines neighbors consistent with Mass General Law 48, Chapter 11, which is party of interest. And so the party of interest would include abutters, owners of land directly opposite or any public or private street or way, and abutters to abutters within 300 feet of the property line of the petitioner. So, and this is consistent with 40A, and with the appeal process going to the Board of Appeals, they're very familiar with that as well. So that's all. It's a very simple change.
Great, thank you. Joe Gallinan, Town Council, I would love to hear from you about your concerns about legality, and I see Mr. Benka has arrived, and we would like to hear his thoughts as well. And if Dan Bennett has anything to add about enforceability, that would be great. And then we'll go on to the substitute motion.
Thank you very much. I'll keep my remarks short. I have a long memo. That memo was a draft. I intended in following it up with a final version, but through this process, I've been asked to do many things. So I haven't got to the final version because I originally asked if the AG's office reviews these type of questions that I raised, my concern. I didn't think so because it's really kind of a as applied problem as opposed to a facial review that the AG's office does. I did note that I researched that and came across 17 different examples where the AG's office has reviewed bylaws for this specific concern of mine. And in many circumstances, either denied it because there hasn't been a history of regulating it under zoning. So they did not approve the general bylaw, or allowed the general bylaw because there was no history of regulating it as zoning. The problem that we have is that we do have a history of regulating lights through zoning. In the last couple of years, really since 2016, it's been under the sign bylaw, but that's because previous to 2016, we had an illumination bylaw that had been inadvertently deleted in 2016 was when there was an amendment to the sign bylaw to address a Supreme Court case, Reed versus Gilbert, that changed how signs could be regulated by municipalities. So town meeting reacted to Reed v. Gilbert and deleted the illumination bylaw. So the practice of the town had been to continue regulating lights, even though it was after 2016 only left in the sign bylaw. So our history is both regulating lights as lights, but in the last 10 years, regulating under the sign bylaw. And people could say, the text doesn't allow that. That's an argument. However, we have been. So for the past 10 years, that's been our practice, to regulate lights through our sign bylaw. So the idea that we haven't comprehensively regulated lights through the sign bylaw, that might be an argument that we could say for the past 10 years. It can't be for previous to 2016. And also we've been doing it, so de facto as opposed to de jure. So that's not going to be looked favorably by a court. And also the idea in these 17 different municipal law unit determinations about these cases, there isn't a situation where they've said, you have regulated it, but that's not comprehensive enough, so we'll approve the bylaw. In those 17 circumstances, the only time they've allowed a general bylaw when there had been a history of a zoning bylaw was to license it. Kind of like what we do with cannabis. You can regulate it through zoning, but you can license it through a general bylaw. That's really the only time the AG's office has allowed this to happen. So I'm happy to answer any other questions. I do owe you a final memo, and that's, I have not connected with the AG's office about whether they would hypothetically, look at ours. However, I have researched that they do this. I have reached out to Pelham and New Marlborough to find out whether they have looked into this. Neither of their municipal councils have got back to me, and I still have to connect with the municipal law unit about a hypothetical review of our bylaw. I'm sorry, warrant article.
Thank you. Mr. Benka, you want to provide some color commentary as well?
Just very, very briefly. There was a memo, as you know, filed by Town Council's office. I responded to that the arguments that I made are set forth in that memo. I haven't seen anything subsequent to that. The argument that 10 years ago we regulated this, we had a zoning bylaw in place. That was 10 years ago. That has not been the case for the last 9 or 10 years. I don't know the extent to which we have attempted to regulate lighting that is not signs, but to the extent that that has been done, it is not something that is provided for in our zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw is explicitly now limited to signs. It is not a general bylaw, to the extent that the building commissioner has used that bylaw, it would be a matter of persuasion and jawboning, rather than a matter of a bylaw, a zoning bylaw actually providing regulation. So, I guess we'll see where things end up, but at the present time, we do not have a comprehensive zoning bylaw in place, and we have not had a comprehensive zoning bylaw in place for almost a decade.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, this would be a good transition for any comments from you.
Sure. I'll comment on the proposed bylaw. I'm comfortable, with the standards that the petitioners have proposed in the latest draft. It does, give me, the ability to measure and determine, certain violations with the shields, 3,000 lumens, and, measurability, at the lot line. So that is something that I could certainly work with. With respect to, this being a general bylaw versus a zoning bylaw, I don't know how this will work when and if it gets passed at town meeting. And if I get inundated with, complaints, this is something that I don't really have the staff or the time for, but I would certainly prioritize how they came in and get to them eventually. But it's not something I would be able to do immediately if we were inundated with those, complaints. With respect to our current zoning bylaw, I have been enforcing it as if, the language was under illumination, because that's the way it was before. I believe it was inadvertent in the way that we restructured it when we redid the signs. But to Mr. Banker's point, it is mostly, if I get a complaint, I don't like telling anybody that we don't have any regulation. You can do whatever you want to do. So I do go out and I do my best to work with both parties and come up with a solution. So it is job owning. I go out and I talk to both parties, redirect the light, a lower wattage bulb, or add some sort of shielding. So what I'm doing now is essentially what we're trying to put into this general bylaw. So hopefully, however things proceed, it'll give us the tools to do what we need to do, in this regard. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Trevette, as the petitioner of the substitute motion, this would be an opportunity to explain what you're trying to achieve and how it differs from what's come before us so far tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm in a strange position of submitting a substitute warrant article in support of what the petitioners originally said their goal was. When I first got involved in hearings on the warrant article 8, I had two main issues. One, because of I'm the chair of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I was the lead author in completing the work of the Select Board's Pedestrian Friendly Lighting Committee back in 2021. I submitted that report and presented it to the Select Board. I have a very strong interest in the public safety aspects of lighting. And the fact is that the town has not identified any funding for pedestrian friendly lighting, and we have many dark sidewalks. And so I wanted to be sure that people recognized that some light trespass is actually a benefit to the town by helping to illuminate dark sidewalks. And I commend the petitioners and other hearing bodies for now recognizing that fact. My second was the lack of specifics in the warrant article in terms of measurability standards. And both of my initial issues have been rectified. 2 weeks ago, I had no idea I was going to be presenting a substitute article, but then suddenly at a planning board hearing, first of all, I saw that a lot of regulations, so-called standards that I did not think were relevant at all to dealing with light trespass had been inserted into warrant Article 8. And when I tried to raise this point at the planning board hearing, I was told, no, we don't need to discuss those. They're only for nuisances. They're only going to be if there's a complaint. We don't need it. I strongly objected to the insertion into our bylaws of things that are labeled as standards without those standards, proposed standards, having been discussed, properly vetted. And I disagree with some of them. If you want to have a dark sky thing, fine. Let's have a dark sky proposal. But the warrant article that was proposed was specifically to address nuisance. And so what I've tried to do is focus as tightly and narrowly and simply as I could on lighting nuisance. There should be that discussion about dark sky. And the way to do that is to say the best thing for dark sky is to have no lights at all. Imagine a totally blacked out town. Okay, we don't want that. Now, what lights do we want to add back into that equation and why? That's the kind of thoughtful review and discussion that we should have. And I think that this, right now, what the petitioner's warrant article has grown into bypasses the proper discussion that we should be having about those issues. And that is the main reason why I submitted warrant article, the substitute warrant article. I could say a lot more about it, but let me just stop right there, and I'm happy to take questions about details because there are many other changes I made as well. I did incorporate, I didn't use the term neighbors in my warrant article. I used occupants of adjacent properties, and I basically inserted a definition that captured the reference that Paul Warren had submitted to try to recognize and address that concern that he had raised.
Great, thank you very much. So I think we have set the stage for a discussion, and so now I'm gonna turn it over to Harry to kick that discussion off.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question. Part of the reason I thought that this proposal was forwarded was not just the effect of light on people, but on animals, on birds, on insects. And so when I saw the Paul Warren's amendment today and saw that the petitioners had incorporated it, the question that came to my mind was, what if you have a house next to a large public park or something like that, next to the golf course, and it has arguably lights that are too bright and are interfering with animals and other wildlife, but there's no neighbor who's close enough to complain? Does this new amendment prevent anybody from bringing it to the attention of the town and having it corrected? Paul?
Hi, thank you, Harry. That's a great question, and that has been brought up. We discussed it at the select board. The town would have standing as a landowner, right? They're in a butter, so they would be within, there would be a direct abutter or across the street. How they're notified, if someone who lives near the golf course is concerned about wildlife in the golf course, of course, they could contact Park and Rec, they could contact the town administrator. But my understanding is that the town as a landowner, the deeded landowner would have standing in that case.
Okay, so now let me just make sure I understand this. What this amendment is trying to avoid is the situation where I have lighting, my neighbors don't seem to care, but some random stranger is driving down the street and decides they want to file a complaint against me. Am I correct on that?
Yes, so you could have folks that are very passionate about dark skies and they spend their evenings driving around town, documenting lights that they feel are intrusive to that, and filing complaints. Or you may have someone that has a grudge from a neighbor that's around the block. I don't know. It's just, it gives standing. I think it really clarifies what neighbors is, and I think it'll help the building commissioner with enforcement, knowing, what the boundaries are for a complaint.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Brian Ladd.
Hi, this is a question for town council, and it's not directly about legality, but it's about the effects of any decision we would make along those lines. So if, on the advice of you or the AG or a court, we decide we will only regulate lighting through the zoning code, given the acceptance of pre-existing nonconformities, does that leave the town any authority to regulate existing lighting, like the bright light on West Roxbury Parkway that we were just shown illustrations of? Would that then just be a matter between the private parties?
So you can talk to your neighbor. That's one solution under this scenario. There also could be that landowner now wants to change their property. Dan can remind me about what's the trigger for a change in use, or change in like the size of the building, or a change in things like that you might trigger. Now you have to comply with the existing zoning. There's lots of levels of when you have a pre-existing non-conforming use, what you do to kind of lose that pre-existing non-conforming use. Does it substantially change? Generally people try to like stay within their footprint, to preserve their pre-existing non-conforming use, but that's not always a solution. So if they change their property, they could then have to comply with the present zoning. So that might be a trigger to then get it. It could be, the proponents, have a, conversation with the owner about, the advantages of dark skies and, the detriment that lighting is causing to wildlife. I have a neighbor that is uplighting their trees, and now we have a vacant owl nest because they want to light up their deck till 11 o'clock, and now we don't have owls in that great tree anymore. So I get this. I'm not I'm not opponent of this. It's just my problem is we're putting it in the wrong place. My suggested amendment is one word: change zoning to general, and then I'm perfectly happy with it.
Thank you.
David Pollock.
Thank you. For those who have the subcommittee report, there's a short section at the top of page 2 called Overview Major Considerations, and there are 3. The one that we've just been talking about, which is the town council's concerns about legality. There's the question that the subcommittee's vote hinges on, which is the setting objective standards. And then there's the last one that David Trevette spoke about, which is the sort of mixing of a nuisance bylaw about 2 specific kinds of nuisance, glare and light trespass, with putting a whole lot of other stuff into the bylaw. So in terms of objective standards, the subcommittee vote was to recommend no action by a vote of 6 with 1 abstention. But to reconsider that if measurability was put in, and we've been told that measurability was put in, but it was only halfway put in. If we go to the bylaw in the most recent version, the petitioners did a great job of putting in an objective standard for light trespass, which can be measured with a light meter. That's done, that's there. You can just go out and you can check it. But their definition for glare, because glare is not so easily measured, their definition for glare continues to be, I'll read it to you: lighting entering the eye directly from luminaires or indirectly from reflective surfaces that causes visual discomfort or reduced visibility. So my question is for the building commissioner: because that doesn't seem objective to me. It's reduced visibility or a discomfort. I think that the building commissioner has said that this gives him something to work with. He can go out there and decide if it makes him uncomfortable or has reduced visibility, but it can't be measured, and it can't be measured because it's just not practical to measure it in the field. Carlos pointed that out. But I think that there's a kind of there's a mixing of elements here, because those additional standards of, well, but you can use a shielded fixture as a suggestion are in there to sort of shore this up as giving options for how to reduce glare, but they're not regulations. They're just in a list of things that would be possible fixes. So it just seems that it's not clear legislation in that way. So to repeat my question, Dan, that definition, if you're called on, there's a glare, how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to manage determination?
Well, glare is probably it's the most difficult part of this whole process. And during one of the subcommittee meetings, I think I had said something about, well, you kind of know it if you see it, and that's unfortunate, but that's kind of the best way that I can, make that determination. But the only way that I know to fix it is to shield the bulb or replace the bulb. And typically it's a clear bulb that causes, the most glare, and it's a clear bulb with a fixture that has clear sides. So in the past, when glare has been an issue, and again, that's subjective, I guess, and it's based on what I see, I have asked that the lens or the outside of the fixture be replaced with something that might be obscured or darkened or tinted, or a bulb that is not clear. And that's the best way that I know to deal with glare. If there's a better way, or at some point down the road we find something that could work, we could certainly look at that.
Thank you. David, you're all set? Thumbs up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would, I will make one more, I will make a comment while I have the floor, which is that I've been thinking a lot about this because I wrote the report, so I've been sort of steeped in this. And I've been thinking about the zoning versus general bylaw question. And what I've realized over the last few days is that while I respect town council's concerns about the sort of idiosyncratic legal framework in which he feels that the town could get into trouble with this and be taken to court and lose. So I totally sort of respect that distinction from a legal standpoint. But what I've realized is that coming at it as an architect, I really just think this should be zoning from a good practice standpoint. First of all, you can really manage to design to control glare if it's in zoning and you're dealing with new construction, because then you can basically say fixtures under certain conditions have to be shielded. Color temperature has to be below 3000 Kelvin, maximum wattage, or lumen output. That's normal to be in zoning. And also the building department that's in charge of all the enforcement here generally is also not exclusively, but generally is referring to the zoning bylaw and enforcing zoning. So aside from town council's concerns about that this would be better in zoning from a legality standpoint, I think it would be better in zoning from just from a regulatory standpoint, even if it were legal. And the cost of that, of not being able to impose the regulation on lights that are already in place. Linda Pelkey asked Dan Bennett how many cases we actually get on an annual basis. And the building commissioner said it's basically one bad apple. It's one builder that's putting up lots and lots of lights on houses that get built. And so I think that that's meaningful, that there really aren't that many that would need to be grabbed by the, to not allow grandfathering. Anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you. Linda Olson-Pelkey.
Thanks, Harry. I guess I have a couple questions to direct to Dan Bennett, if he doesn't mind. We received just before this meeting, the advisory committee received a letter in support with an example of a aggrieved citizen, and it was Martha King. And so I wanted to ask you if you have already tried to intervene in this situation and what your experience has been.
Is there an address? That's not familiar.
It was
to me.
on West Roxbury Highway, and it had really big, bright lights against the side of a building pointing, and they said something about the trees were cut down. And I'm assuming people know who this is. The folks from South Brookline, I think, know. But
Dan,
Yes.
Dan, the complainant lives on Payson Road, and I'll be talking about this in a little bit, but she is complaining quite legitimately, I believe, about new construction on the Parkway, the so-called prison house.
Okay. I now that you said West Roxbury, so it's the corner of West Roxbury Parkway and there's a side street there. I am
Correct.
familiar with that. But I don't recall ever getting a complaint on that. But I do remember hearing it at a subcommittee meeting or some other meeting. And it's interesting because the contractor was in the office the other day, and he was speaking to the inspector. He's trying to get a CO. There's no certificate of occupancy at the property currently. And I had indicated to him that I've received some complaints with respect to the lighting there. And since this is new construction, I feel I do have, some jurisdiction here. So I had indicated to him to send me an email some night, because now the clocks have changed back, so I don't have to come in or wait till late to do a drive-by. And I'll drive by and I'll take a look at what's out there and, try to make a determination of what the violations are, or, where this whole thing lands, because I have not seen it, myself in person. And I said to, give me a call, I think after Veterans Day is what they're looking for. So the house is not occupied. I could certainly give a call to the contractor and ask them to, there's no reason to have those lights on, and to stop, turning them on until such time as we can, walk through and take a look at the, the property and make a determination.
Jocelyn, why don't you show those photos as long as we're talking about this?
Okay, well, while we're doing that, can
Yeah.
I ask my next question of
Yeah, go ahead.
of Dan? So, do you have any thoughts on the proposed amendments from Mr. Warren and Mr. Rubenstein? Because what I'm hearing, their justification for the amendments are to limit random people bringing up things where they don't even live. And I kind of have the opposite concern. I have the concern that by limiting to a defined definition of who, an abutter or an abutter to an abutter, I just can imagine some situations where that's maybe not going to cover somebody who's being annoyed by somebody's lights. It just makes me nervous. I think it's limiting the potential pool of applicability in a way that may come back to haunt us. And I don't know if you've thought about this, if you agree with the potential problems on either side, or if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think it provides some consistency with respect to, who can complain. I wouldn't want some person driving through town that is in a vehicle and felt that there was a light or glare or something, at a home that really has no, I don't want to say no business, but no real, dog in the fight. And then I'm responding to something that, the person doesn't even live in town. So I I did talk to Paul. This is the first time I was hearing about it was today, actually. We had a conversation this morning. I think it's a good idea because, you know, so it's not, it's direct abutters and abutters to abutters within 300 feet. That's a pretty good size area, you know, for people. And those are the same people that would complain if you're constructing a new house or if you're constructing a large addition. I'm not sure if,
Okay.
you know, I guess in certain instances, light could travel a bit further depending upon the time of year.
Okay, and there is something in the proposed new version about construction lighting, but I'm unclear what the provision is. I mean, this is the problem of us trying to evaluate a new version live tonight.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
apologize for this, but I don't understand what's going on with the construction lighting in this bylaw anymore.
So that refers to if you go, you know, this is for larger projects typically.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think if 1180 Boylston Street has any lighting on it at night. You know, some of these steel frames that you see going up that, you know, have been recently built and completed along Harvard and Center Street and probably down at, you know, Chester Hill Realty. But they're the lights that are inside the building and they're, you know, temporary construction lighting to provide lighting inside. So, you know, it's more for security purposes than anything else. I don't know if it's an OSHA or insurance requirement, but it's something that traditionally these projects do.
But
And
this
they're
is
on, you know, from dusk to dawn.
okay, but this is exempted from this bylaw if it gets passed. Construction lighting.
Yeah, I saw that's in there. Yeah.
So if there was some really obnoxious construction lighting, perhaps at the perimeters of the property, it wouldn't, no one could complain about it? That's what I'm confused about.
The lighting that the way I'm interpreting the construction light, it's the lighting that's inside, you know,
Oh,
the
okay.
building. It's not along the perimeter or the outside, you know. But again, you know, I have no problem trying to approach, you know, anybody in town that, you know, if there's a complaint that comes in, having that conversation and, you know, not necessarily having to take everything down, but maybe you could reduce it, you could relocate it, change the bulb, you know. These typically hang under they're a bulb and then they have a screen kind of on top of them. I think everyone would know them if they saw them, and they just hang and they're kind of stringing along, you know, the ceiling, and they probably have 3 or 4 rows on any given floor. You know,
okay,
that's
I
where
see
you would
the
see something along those lines.
one of the petitioners has raised their hand trying to answer this question.
Well, since he hasn't been able to get a word in, I haven't had a chance to call on him, but I'm more than willing to do that. David Titel.
Yes, thank you. Linda, we actually shared your exact concern, and it was the conversation with planning that brought that back. It was made clear to us that construction zones, for legal reasons, need to keep things lit. Unfortunately, because people will illegally trespass onto those zones, fall into pits, fall into holes, trip on hazardous things. They're there illegally, they are trespassing, but they then hurt themselves and the construction zone could be liable. So that was something that was made very clear by all the folks that knew the construction space very well, that needed to be in there, which is why it says temporary lighting for construction sites. It is when needed in temporary for the construction site. Presumably once something is filled and it is, you know, the building is mostly done, maybe not occupied, that light should not be there. That no longer you would then have cause, I would imagine. So
Yeah, and then
hopefully
that's, you know, typically what's called the building is still open to the weather. So anybody can get inside it. Once you get your doors and your windows, that stuff is gone.
Okay, thank you. Just one more comment. I agree with David Trevette and others that the hours don't need to be 10 to 6 because it's very dark at 4 and a light could still be a nuisance during that time period. So I would either change it to 4 to 7 a.m. or just get rid of the time restriction altogether. That's it for me at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go in a bunch of different directions here. Lisa Plazania, did you have anything you needed to add to Linda's question?
No, thank you.
Okay, David Trevette, did you have anything you needed to add to the question?
Not to that particular question. I had a separate question for town council.
Okay, so okay, we'll get to that later then. Jocelyn, you had a two finger.
Thanks, Harry. I've forgotten what the two finger, oh, right, it was about Linda's question. So if I could trouble you to put that photograph up again.
Okay,
I would
I had
appreciate it.
taken it down because it was hurting people's eyes, which I assume is part of the what's going
Yes.
on here.
Yes, that's right. So Linda had asked about this particular property, which is familiar to me because this is a resident in precinct 16 who has reached out to me and to other precinct 16 town meeting members about this situation. And I'd like to point out that this case is the poster child for both glare and light trespass. This property was developed behind her on the West Roxbury Parkway. The house was frankly illegally demolished and then was replaced. And after cutting down most, if not all of the trees, and then the developer added these what have been described as 6-foot luminary lights on the outside of the house, both on the first and second floor, which shine directly into Martha King's property, and it's become, frankly, a quality of life issue for her. A zoning bylaw would not fix this.
Jocelyn, I'm gonna stop the share if you don't mind.
Sure. There was another photo, but perhaps this is enough. Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you, Harry.
This is the more egregious one.
This is the more egregious one.
Can you see it?
No, but it's fine, Harry. I think folks get the gist of this. In any event, my concern as a town meeting member is that this is a significant issue in Brookline. I was driving home last night on Newton Street and was blinded, frankly, by the glare from a light that was on a condominium development on Newton Street just before reaching Grove Street. I tried to take a picture of it, but the photograph just didn't do it any justice. It was a very bright, disturbing light that frankly I think would be an issue for traffic safety. But in any event, zoning is not going to repair this. And I must also say that I fully support Mr. Benka's analysis of the law in this situation. I do not believe that Brookline comprehensively regulates light in its zoning bylaw. And frankly, I think this will pass without comment from the Attorney General. So I have no, perhaps it doesn't matter, but I don't have any concerns about the legality of this article. In any event, zoning is not going to fix the situation. This is a quality of life issue in Brookline. It affects lots of my neighbors. It affects Martha King very directly. And the only way to fix it is to address it in a general bylaw. The petitioners have said, glare when you see it in those photographs, that is glare, right? That is what this woman looks at night after night after night from her rear porch. And so this is an opportunity for us to fix this problem. And I respectfully ask that you support this article. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos Ridwejo.
Thank you, Harry. I had a question, but actually, which was following up on Linda and actually what Jocelyn just said. But I wanted to say that perhaps regarding the hours, perhaps you could do sunset, and then that sort of limit, that's dynamic with the winter and the summer hours, and helps a lot more. But my question really is about the Warren Amendment. And I guess I'm going to ask town council or the building commissioner, because right now, for example, if you have a complaint about a noise complaint, it's not just the butters, it's anybody who drives by and can do a noise complaint. And so and if someone is building an egregious addition or whatever it may be, right now you're not limited to abutters to complain about it. It can be anybody in town, I believe. So what example do we have in town where it's limited just to abutters? And that's one question. And then what happens also with like friends of the park, friends of the owl wildlife, the raptors, whatever it was that friends that society was called. How they're not part of the town. So if the commission on Park and Rec does not make the complaint, then who can make the complaint when it's not in a butter? And so if I could just get examples of how that's done now, if using the Warren Amendment, and how you could do a complaint if the Warren Amendment goes through.
Let me try to answer that to begin with, and Dan can backstop me if I'm missing anything, and you can remind me if I'm if I neglect to answer something. So examples of things that we enforce already, kind of with this standing argument. So you're right about like a noise complaint. If someone is suffering a noise complaint, they can call the police and they'll bring out a noise meter, and it's not just limited to an abutter or an abutter to an abutter within 300 feet. However, zoning does have that standing requirement. If there was an example of a building, so the abutters can make a complaint, bring a judicial review. If we were to allow something under zoning and an abutter to an abutter within 300 feet disagreed, they could take it to court. If there was some type of zoning enforcement after a structure is completed and occupied, but there would be something that that could be observed by someone. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you would go out and look at that and see if it's compliant with zoning. The problem is, if then Dan says he's not enforcing it, there would be a problem with that person seeking an appeal to the ZBA because they don't have standing. So I think those are kind of the examples I'm thinking about in reaction to your first question. Your second question about who has standing if the Warrant Amendment was to go through. In examples of parks, Paul mentioned that. The agency that has care, custody, and control. So is it the Conservation Commission? Is it the Parks and Rec Commission? Is it the golf course? So that town kind of body would have. And as I understand the most recent amendment to the warrant article, even the building commissioner himself. So even if it was just like the school department and this, the school committee wasn't bringing it forward, Dan can bring it forward. So I think
So if friends of one of the parks could not make a complaint.
Yeah, so I would suggest the friends group talk to either the parks, the agency with care, custody, and control, or Dan, and then those parties would be able to bring a complaint, but not like Friends of Halls Pond itself. Friends could talk to the Park and Rec Commission. The Park and Rec Commission can file a complaint, or they could talk to Dan, and Dan can just do enforcement. That's how I understand the warrant article today.
Yeah, okay. Just on another note with respect to the noise, there are many departments that enforce that, not just the building department.
Sorry, and police. Yeah,
so exactly. That's helpful. But any noise complaint that I get, it's always been in a butter, someone just nearby, because I think there might have been one issue on Center Street. There were some rooftop units on a very tall building that some people, probably a quarter of a mile away, were hearing, but they were also direct abutters, and they're the ones that brought it to me, and I acted on it, and we had repaired it. So the building department very seldom gets a complaint from anyone other than an abutter or a resident nearby. I can't speak for the health department and police and others that have jurisdiction on the noise end of it.
Thank you. I'd also note that the Rubenstein amendment would, I think, has a scrivener's error where it says residential, and it should say residence area. So, thank you.
Carlos, are you directing your question also to Paul Warren?
Sure, why not?
Paul?
Yep, thank you, Carlos. So just a quick point too, and this may be for town council. Without a standard of a definition of who has standing, and anybody can file a complaint. Depending on how the building commissioner responds or doesn't respond, it could be discriminatory in nature. If everybody has standing, even someone outside of the town, he would have to respond to that and not say, well, you don't have standing. So I think the definition really does. Is that, Joe, would that be true?
So what I'd be more concerned about with your amendment passing, but then as the bylaw is written, so if anyone could bring it to Dan and Dan says no, but it's a North Brookline resident complaining about a South Brookline resident, and they take it to the ZBA, they don't have standing to do that. Because this is another problem with kind of like you're putting zoning concepts into a general bylaw. So Dan is the one deciding, whether it's compliant, but if they're unhappy with that, they go to the zoning board of appeals. So you have these concepts of zoning in what's supposed to be a general bylaw.
Right, but it does define standing. And one other question, someone keeps referencing the Rubenstein amendment. Is that an amendment to the Warren amendment, or is that something different?
It's an amendment that was proposed a couple of hours ago, changing the definition or updating the definition.
I think he was tacking it onto yours for whatever reason, but yes.
Okay, I'm unaware of it. So
I think it's just to clarify the definition of residential district.
Correct.
Oh, it's just a clarification. Okay, thank you.
To bring it into standards with other similar definitions defined elsewhere.
Alec Lebovitz.
Thanks, Harry. I had a couple questions that were already covered, but I just had one quick point of clarification regarding the Rubenstein amendment. I'm wondering, and apologies if I missed this in the petitioner's earlier remarks, but have the petitioners reviewed that amendment? And if so, are they accepting that as a friendly amendment, or have they taken a position on the Rubenstein amendment yet?
David?
We have reviewed it. We are fine with it. We have every intention to fold it into whatever we submit before noon tomorrow.
Great, thanks.
With Carlos's error caught and corrected.
Of course. And then one quick follow-up on that. Is there any substantive impact on the enforceability of the bylaw with the Rubenstein amendment folded in, or does this simply clarify which residential areas would be applied? Because it references the definition of residential districts in the zoning bylaw, but I didn't see the language of that definition included in the email that I reviewed. So I'm just curious if we have a sense of if that's in any way substantive from just the residential areas originally called for in the bylaw.
Is that me?
That might be better directed to town council or someone who's more familiar with the zoning bylaws.
What I thought.
I may be more familiar with the zoning bylaws, but I'm not more familiar with Michael's amendment, so I'm trying to read it. So if you want to turn to me, you have to give me a little more time. So.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we come back to answer that later?
We'll come back. Perry Grossman.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the petitioners could respond to David Trevet's amendment. I want to if they could just recap their concerns about his approach. Thanks.
So sure, I can speak to that. So one of the things that we tried really hard to do in this process was listen. And while we did a lot of listening, one of the things that was made very clear is we heard a chorus of people saying we needed standards. We needed measurable things that came from the town, that came from various committees, that came from the subcommittee of this group. We heard that, we included it. Whether we did that enough is something you'll need to rule. and you'll need to vote on, but it's something that we really pushed for. The amendment that David spoke to, and I'm putting words in his mouth, so he should rebut if I'm misspeaking. When we originally came to planning with it, it didn't have those standards. And when we put those standards in, that's where we skewed from what his desire for what it should have been, what the bylaw should have been. So I think that's where we kind of separated. There are some specific things in the Trivette substitute article that we disagree with. But really what it boils down to, just in a sense, is that we really tried to follow the advice we got as we did this tour, and we're honestly, taken to task for a few things that this Warren article was lacking, that we feel strongly it no longer lacks. But that made it differ from what David desired, to the point where our impression is that he felt it necessary to file a substitute Warren article. Does that answer your question, Perry?
Yeah, thank you.
David Trivette, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I mean, let me just say that I was able to have a conversation with Dan Bennett yesterday afternoon. And I specifically asked him, since basically what I've done is back out from what the petitioners have, those proposed standards that I felt were not needed to address nuisance issues. And I asked him, would the things that I've deleted, keep you from being able to do your job? I want to be sure that I did not make things worse for him. I wanted to keep in, and he told me which ones he was particularly concerned about: shielded illumination, shielded luminaires, and the business about motion sensor activated being turned off automatically 5 minutes after the area is vacated. I did retain those. So I think, but believe me, there was a short conversation, and maybe I misunderstood, so please ask him if I'm relating this correctly. But I think that what I have removed does not in any way keep him from being able to do his job. So what I wanted is to keep in what's necessary for a nuisance to be addressed, and let the other things be addressed in a separate warrant article, maybe next year.
Dan, do you want to comment on that, or?
Sure. So we did have a conversation. It was brief. I did not have it. I was in my vehicle when I was having the conversation, and we did talk, back and forth, and we covered, a lot of area. But I haven't had time to review the warrant article. I think, did you file that this morning, David? Yeah. So I haven't really looked at it to see what is in it. But we did talk about the lumens, we talked about shielding, we talked about, a number of different types of lights. But I'd have to look at the bylaw a little closer to, make any determination, I guess.
Thank you. So I just want to set the rules down. Usually this is a time for members of the committee to ask questions, and we do give the petitioners a chance at the end to sum things up. But I'm going to call on the petitioners who have their hands raised, because I think this sheds some light on the issues of a very confusing warrant article with all its variations. So Elisa Plazonia, you still have your hand raised, so I'll call on you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one other difference between our article and David Trivette's substitute motion, which is the level of tolerance for light. And so we did a lot of research to arrive at the standard that we set of 0.1 foot candles. That's consistent with many of the lighting bylaws that exist, including, for example, Cambridge. And we believe that anything higher automatically, exempting anything higher, which is what Mr. Trevette's article does, would leave a gap of potentially problematic situations that would not be able to be addressed. So thank you.
Thank you. Elisa Jonas. Oh, Joe, that's right. We left you hanging. Why don't we go to you first?
Yeah, I just wanted to say now I'm ready to answer Alex's question if he can remind me what it is. So
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. I was asking about if there's any substantive difference in the applicability or the enforceability of the bylaw should the Rubenstein Amendment be adopted and they change what is currently the language reading just residential area to the zoning bylaws definition of residential districts.
So I do like the amendment because it's a little more specific. However, you do then get into you're again veering closer to what is a zoning amendment, because you're now specifically referencing a zone. Because general bylaws are supposed to be a little bit more kind of broad, but if you're tying it to a specific zone, kind of more like zoning. So it has, the positives that it's a little more clear and specific, but it's clear and specific in a way that you're, again, making it more like a zoning bylaw as opposed to a general bylaw.
Carlos, you have a two-finger on Joe's response.
Yes, thank you, Harry. Joe, are there any examples of general bylaws that refer to zoning districts?
Probably, but that wouldn't be a good idea. So that's my problem with me. You're making
right. Do we know if there are any currently, or
I can look. Okay. I'll research on the fly again. I'll put it in the chat when I'm ready to get back to. But give me a chance. Hold on.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Elisa Jonas.
Hi. I am very concerned about too much lighting, but I do have several questions about the particular article as it's written. It's too bad that we got David Trevette's article so late, because I do think structurally it has a lot of benefits. I had problems reading the section prohibition on lighting, nuisance and standards and materials for compliance. It's kind of a mishmash of you're not allowed to do this, you are allowed to do this. There's a statement saying, the bottom of the statement says lighting that complies with the standards and materials below shall be deemed not to cause a nuisance. And then the first A says outdoor lighting shall not flash, blink or change in color. It doesn't feel like a the way David Trevette has his section written, it's these particular things are prohibited. These are the standards of what you can do. And I just feel like the way it's written right now, the current substitute motion, the current amended article is very confusing. And I would love to see that be more organized. And I was also wondering, D in that section, lighting shall not cause excessive light, trespass, or glare. I don't know why that's there. We've already said it in the first section. So yeah, if you could explain why that's there a second time. I don't understand if under applicability, where it's limited to private property, in what situation is there an exemption for public monuments and public properties and commercial signs? It doesn't seem like that would ever occur on a private residential property. So if someone could explain that to me. Under applicability section F, I was just wondering whether 500 lumens is so low that it might never apply. And I was just wondering, wouldn't it make more sense perhaps to do 800 lumens, which is 60 watt? I don't know whether that would evolve, if that would be of interest. And I have the same concern as Carlos and I guess Harry about the limiting of who can file a complaint. I think it would be very important for friends of or other people that are, anyone that's concerned about wildlife, for example, at the golf course, to be able to file that complaint. And I'm wondering, from Joe, would there be a problem if the complaint can be filed by, that we don't specify who files the complaint, that it could be anyone? And if it gets to the Zoning Board of Appeals, they wouldn't have standing to go to the zoning board, but they could file a complaint. Is that something that one could allow to have in the bylaw?
So, Lisa, you've asked a number of questions of various somebodies. I've kind of lost track, but I think you've asked Joe specific questions and the petitioners specific questions. So we'll go to Joe first because he's unmuted.
So the one I heard for me is, can we allow kind of an appeals process that kind of is only gets you so far? How's that? Is that a fair? Okay.
Sure.
Remember my main complaint about this, but yeah,
right.
Under this scenario, I wouldn't be worried that, say, the complainant could bring a suit against the town because we only gave them some due process, but not as much due process as somebody else. That's not really a good, valid due process claim. They got some process. That they would complain that I don't get all the process that I would want or someone else could get. We're setting up this system that they get something. So I like that. But it doesn't have to be so robust that they get multi-levels of review. There are certain circumstances where you don't get review. So I'm not too worried about that.
So no, I'm wondering,
given my main concern that I'm very worried about. Yes. So yeah.
Do you have to keep in neighbors at all? Or can you just allow a complaint? A complaint being filed? Because
you don't have to
I am concerned that the town might not file, any town entity might not file a complaint, but there might be friends of a park that are not part of a town that might want to be able to file a complaint, and limiting complaints to neighbors would limit that.
No, we don't have to open it up. So, it doesn't
No,
have
I'd
to
like to be able to.
well, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. The other way around. It doesn't have to be limited to neighbors. It can be opened up. Somebody was just asking me about enforcing public land, and it's like, actually, the only person that can enforce things on public land is the Attorney General's office. So neighbors don't have it. The town doesn't have that right. So there are certain circumstances where who can enforce things is very limited. So it doesn't have to just be limited to neighbors. It can be broader, but it also can be very narrow.
So I guess following up on that, is there a reason why the petitioners might not want a broader range of complainants and exclude neighbors, or is there something that I'm missing? I doubt anyone would be filing a complaint if they're just driving through town and they happen to see that there's too much light. I think that that would be such a rare occurrence that I wouldn't be writing a warrant. I wouldn't be writing a bylaw that that prevents that particular possibility from happening?
There are certain circumstances like that. There are circumstances where people do that. Yes. And you can check, you can ask Paul why he's filing this, but I don't think it's insignificant a concern. Yeah.
So Paul?
Yep, Elisa, and I understand and appreciate your concern. I do think that Friends of Falls Pond, Friends of Putterham Woods, Friends of Lars Anderson certainly can reach out and appeal to a number of public bodies, the town, that would represent to the building commission that there's a harm happening from glare. I don't think you're limited to number of paths. Two bodies that would be very open and sensitive to the issues that you're concerned about. But we had one member of your own board here raise an issue of a house that she drove by, and the glare was so much. And if there was no restriction on, at least who has standing, she may be well within her concerns. But without some restriction on who has standing, that complaint could be filed. It could be someone from out of town. It could be a visitor that, hates, bright Santa Claus things, or, well, Santa's not included in this because it's excluded, but you get my point. There could be any number of reasons. So I think it's healthy and beneficial for the community, for the homeowners, for whoever else owns the property, that they have some expectation about who can bring a complaint against them. I think that's just fair and reasonable, and it's good process, and it helps the building commissioner with enforcement and setting expectations. But so I'm the petitioner, that's my response. But I do appreciate the concern you raised.
Thank you. Susan Granoff, do you have a specific point?
Yes.
On this specific
Yeah,
question?
I would
Okay.
like to say one of the other benefits of Paul's insertion of the definition of neighbors is that otherwise the definitions of excessive light trespass, glare, and
Unbelievable.
nuisance, I would consider to be overbroad and vague, because I kept looking at that and saying, well, to whom? There isn't any specific focus. But once you add under the prohibition the specifics that it creates a nuisance to neighbors, that gives it a context and a limitation of sorts, so that the definitions are not open-ended.
Thank you. Elisa, do you want to now go to your questions to the petitioners? Or...
Sure. Well, for one thing, under applicability, why do we have sections A and B?
Yep. I think they were taking notes. David?
I was taking notes. I'll go through everything I have, and then let me know if I miss anything, okay?
Okay.
So for applicability, sections A and B, those were two concerns that we heard throughout the community about this, and we wanted to be explicit because we want, does it absolutely have to be there when we say private residential? No, but do we want to be explicit? Yes, we want to be very, very clear there. So that is why that's there. If we drop down to 2F, I'm sorry.
Wait, how can one to me, it's just confusing. Am I missing something here that we're saying private residential property, and yet in the next line, we're saying public monuments and public properties are exempt? That confused me too.
Even as written, there were people who in our roadshow, for lack of a better term, asked questions about, well, what about this commercial? What about that private, governmental building? What about this school? And we were able to refer to A and B to clarify. So it's actually done a lot more clarification. I understand it is a little superfluous, but it is serving a purpose and it is working. So I think we would stand by that. I think it does no harm, and it's actually, it has helped. Jumping to F, where you asked about 500 lumens, that is, a 40 to 50 watt bulb. Again, Alyssa put this really well. We did a lot of research with what is best practice in the dark sky world when writing statutes like this and writing bylaws like this. So we really sort of followed along with that. So that's where that number came from.
I'm just wondering, does anyone put in 40 watt as opposed to 60 watt in that particular situation?
Honestly, I would have to go back and look, but that's what we grabbed because that's what we saw in the best practice bylaws that we started it from.
You can't use watts because watts refers to incandescent bulbs, not to LEDs.
No. I've converted lumens
I'm
to
saying
watts.
you can't refer to watts because watts don't, the lumen context is in the context of an incandescent lamp, not an LED. A 50 watt LED would be enormously bright.
No. I'm sorry. I think
I
David
understand
knew
what
what
you
I
mean.
meant. That
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, and it's the conversion. Yes, the equivalent. It's
Right,
the
exactly.
light equivalently is what
Right.
she's talking about, and I'm right there with her. And yes, you're absolutely right. Why couldn't it? I understand the question, which is why wouldn't it be the light equivalent of an incandescent 60 watt bulb instead of a 40 watt bulb? Is your question, and the answer is because we went with best practice with dark sky.
Right. I mean,
Jumping.
right. I was just thinking, is it going to basically be an exception that's almost never going to be used because 40 is so low? But anyways, that explains why you've done it. Right.
The next question that you had was going down to the prohibitions, and you asked why is 2A is 8.4A there. One of the things that's important about this prohibition section that I think I want to make clear is that it also involves a lot of safe harbors of what can I do to mitigate the problem easily and quickly and cheaply to ensure that I don't incur a fine and I am accommodating the neighbor that I am accidentally nuisancing, because I'm not assuming that anybody's doing this on purpose. So how can they get out of the woods, if you will, and get this solved? So this is a lot of the things. So if it's a blinking light, then that's a problem, and so on and so forth. So that's why that's there. I do hear you loud and clear that the paragraph above it is a little unclear. We can certainly look to the wording about that. I do want to make one point that while I've got the floor here
and
now-
also D, isn't D
also D.
repetitive? Why is that there on top of?
Fair point on D. I don't have a rebuttal on D. Fair point on D. And we will absolutely look on that. I do want to make one more point while I have the floor here, because it's a point that's been brought up many times about time. And one of the things that we tried to do with, why is it 10 o'clock? Why isn't it just, why isn't it sundown? Why isn't it all times? And this is the difference between us and the Trevette substitute motion. There's a few reasons for that. One is we wanted to draw a line in the sand of just when is and when isn't for enforceability and make it very clear. So that's one part of it. One part of it is that we wanted to make it so this is, again, a complaint-driven nuisance bylaw, right? Issues are going to be complaint-driven. So we wanted to make it clear that this is happening after a time. So if somebody's got lights that they want, somebody can't be going out at it was 5:04 was sunset tonight. It's now 5:05. I'm complaining. There's been a lot of concern about people potentially abusing this, which actually gets to my final point, which is why the neighbor amendment that Paul Warren put in is something we're in favor of. We've heard a lot of concern about abuse and people and vendettas and things like that. Putting in the time at 10 p.m. means it's not going to affect most people's sleep, but at the same time, it allows some leniency, and it's all about compromise. We're trying to find a middle ground here. We're hearing it from both sides of what people would like, what they won't. As I said, we have done a lot of listening, and we're trying to find that middle ground. So that's a lot of the reason why the time got there. So I did want to bootstrap that on, even though it wasn't exactly your question, because it's been the question that other people have asked, and I got the floor. So anyway, I will stop talking unless you have another question for me.
Nope. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joe, you can now answer Carlos's question.
Yes. Recognizing this is a research on the fly, but I did search our general bylaws for the categories of zoning. So not S10, but single family, residence, business, industrial, overlays, Harvard Street. And I came up with two kind of circumstances where our general bylaws refer to zoning districts. One is the Hancock Village Neighborhood Conservation District, which was struck down as a general bylaw that should have been a zoning bylaw. And the other one is what we do is snow and ice, and this is 7.7. So 7.7 talks about first business and industrial districts, 7.71, then 7.72 is multifamily, and then 7.73 is general requirements. So it has a little bit of a flavor of kind of the zoning in a general bylaw, and that's kind of the concern that I have there.
Thank you. That's probably why it doesn't get enforced.
Thank you. So I will, this is all fascinating. I will remind people it's 10 of 9. We still have 2 warrant articles after this, as important as this is. Lee Selwyn.
Thanks. I wanted to address the issue of standards, measurable standards, because from the very outset, when this first came up at the subcommittee, I made the observation that the notion of a trespass occurring when a beam of light crosses a property line is something that is not really dealt with in physics. And we asked the petitioners to come back to us with some measurable standard, and we, after a 2 or 3 hour meeting, the first time we had another 2 or 3 hour meeting, and they failed to do that. And the first time I've seen a measurable standard was about an hour before tonight's meeting at 0.1 lumen, which I think somebody mentioned. But I wanted to, put that in some context. A 0.1 foot candle, I'm sorry. Let me just read you the definition, a definition that Google Artificial Intelligence comes up with. The number of foot candles can be calculated by dividing the number of lumens by the square of the distance in feet from the light source. For example, 100 lumen light at a distance of 10 feet produces 1 foot candle. In other words, 100 lumen light divided by 10 square, or 100, produces 1. So let me put that calculation in a perhaps more interesting context. Because 100 lumens is equivalent to about a 10-watt incandescent lamp. So let's say we have the equivalent of a 100-watt incandescent lamp. And by the way, I think people under 25 years old probably don't even know what an incandescent lamp is, which is kind of it's like my grandson first saw a dial telephone in my house and didn't know what that was either. But in any event, if you have 100-watt, the equivalent of a 100-watt incandescent lamp, which is going to produce about 1,000 lumens at a distance of about 30 feet, that produces 1 foot candle of light at that 30-foot distance. I don't think and that's 10 times the standard that's being proposed here, 0.1. The standard that's being proposed here, 0.1, is roughly the same order of magnitude to the amount of light that hits the Earth from a supermoon of the type that we have right now, a supermoon being where the moon is at the closest distance to the Earth, perigee, at a full moon. Tonight's almost a full moon, and you could practically read a newspaper with the amount of light it generates. And the point here is we want to deal with the kind of issues that we saw in those photographs. Someone having a 100-watt lamp on their front porch that's 30 feet from a neighbor would be in violation because they would, under this standard, because they would be 1 foot candle at the property line instead of 0.1. And I think that's, to me, is really pushing things too far. And I mean, if the moon is in violation, then people are going to sue the moon in Brookline. People in Brookline would figure out a way to do that, I'm sure. But the point is, we need a measurable standard. Now, on the other hand, if something is egregious, like the photos that we saw, that's easily measured. And I mean, I can't tell you precisely how many lumens those lights are generating, but let me give you, just as an example, a 4 foot fluorescent tube generates about 2,500 lumens. And, just from what I could see there, it looked like each of those fixtures was probably the equivalent of about 2 4-foot fluorescent tubes. So you probably had about 25 or 30,000 lumens coming out, out of that house. And again, I'm just guessing from the photograph. It's in no sense a reliable measure, but that's going to produce a lot of foot candles at a distance, at a property line, at a butter's property line, easily measured. I think we need a standard, but 0.1 is ridiculous. I think that a standard of 5 or 10 foot candles is probably not unreasonable. And I'm not prepared to tell you what the right number is. I wish the petitioners had actually done some work in this area instead of just coming up with something that doesn't make any sense. But the notion of having no standard is I don't think acceptable. And the notion of having a standard that is so onerous that makes no sense at all also doesn't make any sense.
Thank you. David Trevette, I'm going to come to you at the end when we sort of do the petitioners roundup, if you have questions or comments at that point. David Titel, do you have a direct response to Lee?
I do. First, I'll say honestly, I'm a little offended by the accusation that there was no research done. First, I'll drop some of my own experience here. I am an 8-year editor at Sky and Telescope magazine. I have a degree from Caltech in planetary science and astronomy, very well versed in this. I can tell you that the 0.1 number is the standard by the Dark Sky Association. It's what's been adopted in Cambridge and other places. I agree that you may not agree with that number, and that is totally reasonable, but to accuse us of not doing our homework is frankly insulting and not
I don't
fair.
want to be accused of not having done something. The petitioners had ample opportunity to come to the subcommittee with numbers. And the first time I saw a number was tonight. That was the basis of my accusation. Just so you understand, we put a lot of effort into vetting these articles. And when we're not given that kind of input during our hearings, and we get it an hour before the advisory committee meeting, that's what I mean when I say you didn't come up with any answers.
I'm sorry for misunderstanding.
Okay,
that said, the 0.1 number is the standard from the Dark Sky Association that you see throughout the Commonwealth. It is in many places. This is not unique to Brookline, and it is not a unique number.
Thank you.
With due respect, we're
Thank
not
you.
looking at astronomical standards here. We're looking at things that are reasonable for people to have in their houses to light up their pathways. And I'm sorry, I don't think having a something that's I've been involved in an amateur astronomer of sorts over many years, and I'm familiar with your publication. In fact, I probably many years ago probably subscribed to it, but I can tell you that the issue here is reasonable lighting in a residential area, not to reach astronomical or astronomer standards.
Let's move on. Janice Kahn.
Thank you, Harry. So first of all, I am married to one of the co-petitioners of this article, Ira Krepshin, but that really means that I've been following a lot of the discussion. So I'd like to kind of frame what we've been hearing, because I found it really helpful to hear people's comments and concerns. So first of all, the baseline is that what we have currently in our zoning bylaw is ineffective for our building commissioner to be able to have any real regulatory power. So, and as was pointed out, we have not regulated lighting. The only lighting that's regulated is really signs right now in our zoning bylaw, but not residential lighting. So then the issue turns to, historically, what do we do in Brookline? So historically, we address nuisance in our general bylaws. We have one for noise, we have one for leaf blowers, and now there's one being proposed for lighting. And this all makes sense to me, that this is in fact how we historically regulate nuisance in Brookline. And that's what this is. This is a nuisance bylaw. The other thing I noticed too is that every nuisance bylaw has standards in it. So, so it's appropriate that there are standards. The question that Lee raised now is kind of interesting to me, but I think, Lee, that the reality is that no one is going to make a complaint if the light is 1 foot candle. But they are going to make a complaint when it is egregious, like the photo that we saw. So I don't think that it's going to be really an issue. I don't think
They're
that's
talking about 1.1 foot candle.
I'm sorry, 0.1 foot candle. I still think that no one is going to complain about a light at that level. That's not what we're talking about. That's not the nuisance. But it's okay to set that as a standard. You know, Dan, you know, whoever is our building commissioner in the future will have a tool that that does not exist currently in the town. But this is clearly an issue, and neighbors do talk to each other and try to get some relief. It's more than one egregious developer in our town that is creating this problem. It is a much bigger problem. And we want to give our town the tools to be able to, you know, to deal with problems that are brought to their attention.
I don't disagree with you in any respect, Janice, except for the number. The point is that this number is so ridiculously low compared to what we would normally expect to find in a residential neighborhood where someone with a 100-watt bulb 30 foot from the property line would potentially be in violation. I just am very troubled by that. And if you're going to have people making complaints and they measure it at, you know, at 0.9 foot candles or something like that, then if we put this in the bylaw, there is a basis for a complaint, and that's not appropriate.
I just think, Lee, that it's unlikely that there would be a complaint generated by that. So, and the other, I had one more point. Oh, about, I was interested in listening to residential districts. In listening to the select board discussion, I know that one of the issues is that our commercial areas abut residential areas, and they're really, in our zoning bylaw, they're really part of the commercial area, the way we draw them. And so I do have a question whether it makes sense to keep it as residential areas, because then it could really be applied to residential areas within commercial districts. You know, that's when the EDAB was really concerned about commercial areas and the vitality of the streetscape. And that's why that was pulled out. My understanding from the select board was that it's this idea that you could have these light impacts into residential areas within commercial districts. So I just wonder whether it doesn't make sense to keep it residential areas. And the planning board wanted standards just like the subcommittee did. So I do think that this is a group that has worked very closely with town departments and with, listening to the concerns of lots of people in the town. Will never please everybody, but I think that this bylaw, the way it's constructed now, has a good shot of at least giving the town tools to enforce something that is really a problem for many people in this town. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Michael Berger.
Thank you, Harry. I have a question, just to be clear, because we've talked about zoning bylaws and bylaws, warrant Article 8 and the other alternate warrant article and the amendments really refer to we're talking about a bylaw, not a zoning bylaw. Is that right? That's what's before town meeting. So it requires a majority vote, not a 2/3 vote. Is that correct? I don't know who I'm asking. Anybody can
That's
answer.
correct.
Yes.
So the other question then, and I was interested in Joe's discussion and Dan's discussion about enforcement, because we haven't talked much about enforcement, the difference between enforcement rigor, whether it's a zoning bylaw or a general bylaw. If it's a general bylaw, what kind of enforcement do we have in these articles? And who's going to be doing it? I guess I don't know who I'm asking, but I don't hear anybody answering it.
Because I'm loath to volunteer unless called on, but I'll step up and anyone else can follow on. As drafted, the primary entity that would enforce it would be the building inspector.
Okay. And fines, they're defined.
Yes, there's fines provisions. There's kind of our municipal 21D, $300 a day. Well, I think it's $100 for the first violation, $300 a day for multiple violations. There's a period that allows people to remedy it. So there's a fine structure in the bylaw.
And you believe, Joe, since you answered the question, thank you, that the general bylaw would be the better approach than a zoning bylaw.
Correct. Because although, going to Janice's point about like nuisance should be regulated in general bylaws, but Brookline's history is we've been regulating lighting through zoning.
Gotcha.
And now we're stuck in that path, stuck in that lane. Got to stay in your lane.
Okay. Thank you.
Harry stepped away, so
Yeah, did Joe, sorry, can Joe just say what he just said? Because I think he got reversed.
Possibly it's late. I just had my cheese and crackers for dinner, so I'm also peckish. But what I was referring to was if nuisance is the type of thing that you want to regulate through a general bylaw. Zoning, you want to regulate uses and structures. So ideally, if we had started from the beginning, you would have regulated lighting through a general bylaw, but we didn't. Before 2016, I don't know when it was enacted, we had an illumination bylaw that was in zoning. And now because of Rayco and the Loverquist and Valley Green Grow cases, they talk about like, if you start in zoning, you got to stay in zoning. And I haven't found a case where you could start in zoning and switch. There's been no case that has ever allowed that.
Right. So therefore, you're recommending that this is a zoning bylaw, not a general bylaw, which is sort of the opposite that was just said a few minutes ago.
By me, if I said that, I apologize. My memo is very clear that's what I'm right. Exactly. Sorry.
Linda,
it's been a long week and a long day. So yes.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate, because Janice brought it up, I also am opposed to the Rubenstein Amendment, limiting it to actual residence zones, meaning areas that are only residential. We will still have the limitation that it has to be the light source is from a residential building. But we do have residential areas that are interspersed in other zones, and I don't think they should be unable to bring a complaint if they have a problem. We can't have a complaint against a commercial lighting, so that's covered. So everybody who didn't want it to apply to commercial, that's still covered. I'm just saying that I don't think we should limit it to the zoning districts that are residential only. I think we could be missing problem areas if we do that. And I don't think we lose anything by not limiting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Westfall.
I've looked over the paperwork and I've listened to the argument here, and what's clear to me is none of this is ready to go to town meeting for real.
I agree.
What we're really seeing is something that started out with a dark sky basis and then turned into nuisance, and the tension between nuisance and dark sky in terms of the standards that we're going to use to evaluate this. And this is just crazy. You know, we really, I know that the petitioners have put a lot of effort into this. I know that the subcommittees put a lot of effort into this, but the reality is that we're all over the place with it. And the standards, you know, Lee's right, that set of standards has nothing to do with the nuisance lighting, and isn't effective to, you know, regulate nuisance lighting. It's effective to regulate dark sky lighting. And quite frankly, I live in the city because I like lots of ambient light at night from a safety perspective. You know, I can drive out of the city if I want to see the sky. So I'm not going to support any of this. I don't think any of it's ready for prime time.
Is that?
That's my comment.
So you're
There's no
not
question
proposing
about it.
any kind of, you're
I'm
not going to recommend referral, you're going to recommend no action when you're going to vote
I'm going
no
to
action.
recommend no
Okay,
action.
just checking. Okay.
Neil Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. I'll be delighted to recommend referral. We're at the end of the process of reviewing the warrant for the November special town meeting, the end of the process. I got an email from a town meeting member saying, where was the notice that one of the articles tonight was being brought up, right? Because we're at the end of the process. I got an email with a proposed amendment. I was already here, right? We were a couple of minutes to the start of the meeting, right? So do I listen to the meeting or do I read it? I surely haven't studied it. I haven't read it at all. You know, we've got a well, it'll give the town some tools, and nobody's going to ever complain about you know, a ridiculously low, pardon the expression, standard. Why don't we set a 2 mile an hour speed limit? Because we know nobody's going to enforce that. But that way, if someone is sort of going too fast, we'll know it when we see it. This is just not ready, and I'll move for referral to a moderators committee. Let me say this. I'm well reminded, for those who remember, the number of iterations we went through in terms of trying to find proper measurement for nuisance noise, not the party bylaw, but the ambient noise, daytime noise and nighttime noise, and stand across the street with the with the noise meter. We have this would not be the first bylaw that said an hour before sunset or an hour after sunset. We have parks that are open from sunrise to sunset. We know when sunset is. It's not hard. Nobody complains because it's a minute before or a minute after. We know the difference between light and dark. We're just not there on this, right? And the amendments keep flowing. I think that this needs to go either no action and let somebody bring it back in some reasonable form, or refer to a committee, because we're not solving this between now and town meeting.
Thank you. Jocelyn?
Thank you, Harry. So I would like to remind this body that a lighting bylaw was brought forward, I believe it was last year, and it was referred back to the planning department. And the planning department did nothing. I mean, they did not come up with a draft, and they said they weren't planning to come up with a draft, notwithstanding the fact that it had been referred. And so this group gathered together and they put forward an article that is intended to address nuisance lighting in Brookline. And I also remind this group that it was town council's recommendation last year that this be brought forward as a nuisance bylaw. The standard that has been disparaged by members of this body is a standard that has been adopted by one of our peer communities, Cambridge. It's in effect. Certainly haven't heard about any complaints within the city of Cambridge about the use of that standard. And I also want to point out that Brookline regulates a number of subjects under both the zoning bylaw and the general bylaws. Marijuana, for example, signs, I believe there are a couple of others. So my view is that this is a significant issue for many residents in Brookline. Christine may choose to live in where she lives because she likes lighting, but there are others who are very disturbed by intrusive lighting. And several of the folks who live in my neighborhood are disturbed by intrusive lighting. And so a nuisance bylaw under the general bylaws is necessary. I think the petitioners have done an extraordinary job of collaborating with several stakeholders and making changes to their bylaw. So let's do it. And then if there are issues, we can amend it down the road, but the time is now. It's already been referred. That was unsuccessful. So let's vote this now and get it approved. Thank you.
Thank
So
you. Dennis.
No, so we're at the point where Mr. Trevette has been waiting patiently to be called back on. And we will need a few, hopefully brief summary comments from the various petitioners. And then there's a set of motions that are going to come. So I'm going to start with David Trevette, then David Titel.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Dottie. I just want to point out that I've been, as I said, I had some original disagreements. Those got settled. And so I came around to support the original intent. And I have tried, because I agreed with the original objectives, to track as closely as possible the language that was being used in the petitioner's article. Unfortunately, it's been a moving target, and I have always kept up. In fact, I just discovered tonight that I hadn't kept up. So in fact, in terms of who could file a complaint, it had to be a directly affected party. That was a language that was previously in the petitioners. I hadn't caught up with their change to neighbor. And similarly, the reason you have in front of you a corrected article is I was trying to track their illumination requirement. They originally, I had been told, were going to stick with 0.3, so I made one. I've always felt that probably an eventual dark sky regulation bylaw would put the limit of what was allowed lower than what you would have for egregious, really bothersome light nuisance. And so I always intended to put mine slightly higher than theirs. I was surprised by their 0.3 because what I had heard of the light of a full moon, the illumination from a full moon in a clear night, was 0.03. So currently mine's at 0.09 foot candle. Sorry, changed from looks to foot candle in there. 0.09. I currently have mine at 0.15. So it's basically twice the illumination of a full moon on a clear night. That seemed to me, in mine, remember, it's automatically deemed a nuisance. In theirs, it's a combination of the lighting and causing a problem. So ideally, and David Pollack had asked this question after the subcommittee granted, could we somehow bring things together? And since we were sort of in agreement on objectives, but I think for me, it got complicated by all the other things that got added into theirs. And so I would love it if we could come together. That would be great. So anyway, I shouldn't take any more of your time. I appreciate the hearing tonight. And I'll try to be a little more succinct at town meeting. Thank you very much.
Mr. Titel.
3 points, because we've talked a long time and it's getting late. Four. First, thank you for this opportunity. Second, just a point of clarification, a full moon is 0.01 foot candle, maybe as bright as 0.03 at its brightest. That means that our standards are 10 times as bright as a full moon. So that's a good way of thinking about it. Point number two is this lines up with standards that you see across the Commonwealth, including Cambridge, a place that I would hardly call rural. But the third point and the final point I want to make is, again, I want to go right back to what is the motivation behind this? Motivation behind this is there are people who are dealing with light nuisance issues now. And we wanted to create a pathway for the town to empower them to deal with it. We've worked closely. This has been about collaboration. We've worked closely with everybody we've listened to and we've met before. We've worked very closely with planning and building to get something that is enforceable. They helped draft a lot of the language. This is something we really strongly feel that the town needs, and residents who are dealing with nuisance lighting that's affecting their health and well-being, this is something that will help them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I've been trying to think about what the voting order will be, and this is what I've decided, and I hope that we will just execute on it rather than spending a lot of time trying to fine tune this because it is already 21 after 9. So what we'll do is we'll take the revised motioner from the petitioner, which includes the Warren the Warren amendment. We'll take that on the table once that motion is made. I believe Mr. Gordon is preparing a referral motion that will take precedent. So we will vote that. If it passes, we are done. If it fails, we will then move on to the remaining potential amendments. I suppose there might be an amendment coming to remove or alter Mr. Warren's suggestion. There will be amendments coming to whether to adopt Mr. Rubenstein's proposal. There's the Trivette substitute motion, and Carlos has proposals. So I think it makes most sense for us to lay the petitioner's motion on the table, take the referral motion, and then consider whether we want to replace the petitioner's motion with the Trivette substitute conceptually, and then take the subsequent amendments after that. So that's the order we will vote. And we will do our best to produce a motion we can vote on. Yes, Lee.
A point of clarification. So the only things that are likely to be on the table are the original petitioner's motion, which would have no standard, and an amendment that would have a standard at 0.1. Is that correct?
I am not. There's other changes in the Trivette motion, as I understand it.
But with respect to the light standard, that's what I'm focusing on, because that impacts the way at least I would vote on the referral motion. If that's all there is, then I would vote for referral.
I think we will need some 30-second clarification between the two Davids around that standard, because I don't feel I'm qualified to answer that question.
David Vitale, does the petitioner's motion at this point in time
I
have
think that's my cue.
standards?
Start over again, David. Your connection died. And it died again.
I can answer the question.
Yeah, go ahead, Elisa. Sorry, David.
Yes, our warrant article as amended, as we have filed it with the town, has standards that include 0.01 foot candles for light trespass, which, as mentioned several times, is consistent with most other towns in Massachusetts, including our neighbors across the river in Cambridge.
Did you mean 0.1 or 0.01?
0.1.
0.1.
0.1. Okay.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Lee?
Yeah, and whereas the subcommittee recommendation for no action was a version that had no standard.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so I need someone to move the motion we received from the petitioners most recently.
I will move that.
Second.
Okay, and then, so let me say, so main motion, petitioners revised motion under warrant article 8. All right, so now Neil, do you have a referral motion ready
Yeah,
that you can
yes,
paste in the
yeah.
chat, please? Paste it in the chat, so.
Yes, so I don't have it fully drafted, but let me say it this way.
Okay.
Right, I move to refer the subject matter of warrant article 8 to a moderators committee with an expectation that they bring a proposal suitable for warrant article to be included in the next annual town meeting. That would be May.
Expectation that they bring an article suitable for inclusion at the annual town meeting, the next annual town meeting.
Could I ask a question really quick of Neil?
Absolutely, well, because we're debating his motion, so. just
Terry,
perfect
go
time to do it.
ahead.
Neil, in your motion, would you be willing to add that they bring us a specific standard
I was going
for
to
enforcement?
suggest that also.
So
Suitable for, bring them an article suitable for town meeting that has a
suitable, let
specific
them,
standard.
let them, I think it's, we have enough on the record. We've got a series of proposals in the form of amendments and main motions of various sorts. I think we've had this discussion, and I think that we don't need to, draft the components of the work of the committee. I don't know if there are things in the proposal that don't need to be there. I don't know if there are things that should be in there that are not in there. I'm not at that comfort level right now. I think that a moderators committee can start sort of where we are with proposals. I don't see where this is a significant need for staff time in terms of referral to a select board committee. And I don't think that there is a prohibition in terms of time and complexity from what the starting point is to be able to bring this back in time for, they'd have to finish their work by February.
I'd like to propose that the better answer to Anthony's question would have been no.
Well, sure, but he asked me why. In the interest of time, I revised my answer to no.
Okay, thank you.
Nice.
Linda Olson-Pelkey.
Thanks. I just really disagree with Neil about the amount of time that we should give this because we're going into the holidays. The moderator has to find people willing to serve. They have to do their research. They have to decide what direction they really want to go. I just think this is more complex than, 1 month's worth of a subcommittee meeting. So I think it should be within a year.
I'm happy to go as soon as practicable.
There you go. I like that.
I'm against as soon as practicable, Neil. I think you should keep it for a year max.
Did you
For a
put
year
your
minimum.
name in the chat?
No, I didn't. My bad.
So Neil, how about we split the difference here and say bring an article suitable for inclusion at the next annual or special town meeting?
Town meeting in 2026.
Yeah, in 2026.
The next
At
annual.
an upcoming town meeting in 2026.
Sure. Let me say this quickly because I know we're going to be here late. There are some here who think we're ready to do this now, right? That would argue that a moderators committee in short order, doing the same kind of work that a subcommittee would do, would be more than ready, notwithstanding the holidays, to have a proposal for the annual town meeting in May. If we don't
Right.
think we can get there, then surely this needs to be referred. Let me just leave it at that.
I would just add to that had the petitioners come to the subcommittee with a proposed standard at the get-go, I think we would have gotten it done.
Well, Nothing in the new language prevents anyone from coming back in May. Janice, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, I do have a question about referral, because this is already, as Jocelyn said, this has already been referred. And not only that, but on this committee that put together this article are the experts in lighting and doing this. I can't see how forming yet another committee is actually going to bring us forward. And we need a tool now. I mean, this is something that planning and building are both asking for. And so why would we want to, why, when they're perfectly satisfied with what's been evolved, why would we, with the exception of Lee, with no expertise in the field, presume that a moderators committee would be a better option?
That
So
sounds
let me
more like
answer-
a
let-
rhetorical question.
Let me answer the question as the person who's moving the amendment, the recommendation to refer, right? Because notwithstanding my expertise in the physics of light, I have some expertise in the physics of town meeting, and we're not ready. I'm not ready, and that's why I move for referral. If it's that easy, let the moderator appoint a panel of experts and others, right? And deal with the issues that have been raised that are the holes in this particular proposal right now, and solve it. If it's that, if this can be solved now, like tonight, it can surely be better by May. You say it can't, if it can't be better by May, then I agree with Linda. Let's give it a year.
Thank you. Christine?
I'll second Neil's referral motion, because I didn't hear a second to that. But more importantly, I understand the need for a tool. The problem that I have is I don't know whether we're actually recommending a hammer, an axe, or a scalpel at this point. And I think that it makes a difference what we're recommending in terms of that tool.
Thank you.
All right, we have a referral motion on the table, duly seconded. If this passes, then that's our recommendation. If it fails, there are somewhere between, I don't know, 1 and 4 amendments to be debated before we move on. I'm going to share my screen. For referral, Michael Berger,
No.
Harry Bors,
Yes.
Cliff Brown,
Yes.
Anthony Buono,
Yes.
Harry Friedman,
No.
David Mark Goldstein. Lost David. Neil Gordon. Am I lost? I don't hear.
No,
You're not
we
lost.
can hear you. Yep, we
I
can
can't hear
you.
anybody. I can't hear anybody.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear. I can hear you now. I'm assuming you're voting yes, Neil.
I'm voting yes.
I didn't hear David Mark though.
I think he has disappeared.
Okay, Susan Granoff,
Yes.
Perry Grossman.
Come back to me, please.
Sure, Kelly Hardebeck,
Yes.
Elisa Jonas,
Come back to me too.
Janice Kahn,
Definitely no.
Brian Ladd,
No.
Alec Lebovitz,
No.
Carol Levin,
Yes.
Liz Linder,
No.
Pam Lodish,
Pam had to leave.
Jocelyn Murphy,
No.
Linda Olson Pelkey,
Yes.
Fran Perler,
No.
David Pollock,
I think he had to leave.
Okay, Carlos Ridwejo,
I want to vote both ways. So, I'll vote no because of all the amount of time that they've has already
Okay.
spent.
Margaret Robotham,
Yes.
Lee Selwyn,
Yes.
Chris Westfall.
Yes.
Who did I skip over? I skipped over Perry.
Grossman and Jonas.
Perry.
Yeah, I guess I'll vote yes.
All right, and Jonas?
I'm like Carlos, I want to vote both, but I'll say no.
All right, and is there anybody else that we have skipped? All right, so by a very narrow margin of 12 to 10, we're recommending referral on this particular article. And I thought that was a good discussion. And I thank the subcommittee for a lot of work. And I thank the petitioners, and I'm sure there'll be an extended debate at town meeting. And I hope that the report that comes from the subcommittee can capture a lot of the discussion tonight in support of this particular referral motion, because I think
I thank
there's a
the
lot of
one
complexity
person.
here.
I thank the one person who voted yes, who let Dennis off the hook from breaking the tie.
Dennis, I had a question. So
Yes.
now there are going to be competing motions, right? Our motion of referral, and then there's going to be a different one. But they haven't. We haven't heard anything about what we think about the amendments that have been like. What does the AC if referral? Sorry, I'm really not working today. If referral fails, what do we think about the Warren Amendment, and what do we think about the Rubenstein Amendment? Is there a way for us to say what our opinion is?
It's a good point. We've wrestled with this in the past. I don't remember the precise language that we used, but it was basically of the form subject to, if referral fails, we have a overall recommendation on these amendments, and it's probably worth taking that vote.
Please.
I just have to think about what the language might be. If you'll indulge me sticking in language that we copied and pasted, is essentially it's a sense of the body of those various amendments. So there's the Warren Amendment and the Rubenstein
Can you just
Amendment.
refresh memory quickly of what these are? Warren adds neighborhood and
No, Warren adds the standing, and Rubenstein defines neighborhood.
Okay.
So this is basically a motion. The sense of the advisory is to support the Warren Amendment. The sense of advisory is to support the Rubenstein Amendment. Or not. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm just to say yes if you support and no if you don't, and then we'll just have that as a record for our write-up.
Are we these separate votes?
Yes. I want to do it 2 separate votes. And I'll try to come up with, more formal language to describe this, but I think we know what we are doing, which is we are expressing basically a thumbs up or thumbs down on each of those amendments. The problem, of course, is that this is not strictly kosher, because the amendment would have to be applied to it's going to come up in the context of any number of these motions. So I really want you to view this as kind of a general sense, not a commitment to vote a particular way at a particular time.
Hey, Dennis,
yes.
Can I raise one
Like a
point?
straw poll, yes.
So the select board has not voted yet on this. So we may become the main motion. So,
Okay.
then I came because the board supported
Right,
the motion.
and if that happens and there's a new motion, we might be taking this up again right before town meeting.
Maybe. Okay.
Okay, so I just wrote these out as a sense of the body regarding the Warren Amendment, sense of the body regarding the Rubenstein Amendment. I want you to view these as straw polls. I realize this is slightly out of the ordinary, but I think we understand what we're trying to do, and this is to capture information for our report, because I think that sense will be very important in the report. So I'm just going to go down the list. Warren Amendment, Michael.
Come back to me, please.
Okay, Harry B.
He had to drop out.
Cliff.
Abstain.
Anthony.
Yes.
Harry F.
Abstain.
David, Neil.
Neil, can't hear you.
Okay, Susan. Neil's nodding. Okay, Susan,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Elisa,
Abstain.
Janice,
Abstain.
Brian,
Yes.
Alec,
Yes.
Carol,
Abstain.
Liz.
It dropped out. What are we voting on? Sorry.
So basically, this is a straw poll of whether we support the Warren amendment conceptually, given that we voted to refer the motion.
Got it. Yes.
Jocelyn.
No.
Oh, sorry. Linda,
No.
Fran,
Yes.
Carlos,
No.
Margaret,
Yes.
Lee,
No.
Christine.
Abstain.
Okay, and I think I skipped
Michael,
Michael.
abstain.
Abstain. Okay. 10-4 with 7 abstentions.
Oh,
Similar
wait,
question-
Dennis. I think I
Yes.
confused this one with the Rubenstein one. I think I'm a
Okay.
no on this one, actually. Never mind. I confused them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So now we're going back to Michael's amendment. This is the one that tries to define the to clarify the definition, to formalize the definition of neighborhoods to be compliant with the zoning definition rather than the broader definition of neighbor that was written in the original article. Michael,
No.
do I have another wrong? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You kind of stated it wrong.
I
So,
said it backwards.
well, no, it's residence districts. So it's zoning districts that are residents only, and it
Right.
confines it to that. It has nothing to do
I
with
apologize.
neighbors or neighborhoods.
Yeah, I
Okay.
meant to say residence. It was just it was a Scrivener's type wordsmith. But yes, I agree with completely. Thank you for that clarification. Michael,
Abstain.
Cliff. Oh, it's Harry.
Abstain. Harry,
Abstain.
abstain. Yeah.
Sorry, and Harry was gone. Anthony,
Yes.
Harry F,
No.
Neil,
No.
Susan,
No.
Perry,
Yes.
Kelly,
No.
Elisa,
No.
Janice,
No.
Brian,
Yes.
Alec,
No.
Carol,
Abstain.
Liz,
No.
Jocelyn,
No.
Linda,
No.
Fran,
No.
Carlos,
No.
Margaret,
No.
thank you, Lee,
No.
Christine.
No.
All right, so thank you, Carlos, for suggesting that. I think that's very helpful for the report to get that sense in, because there's no guarantee that our recommendation of referral will be adopted at town
what was
meeting, and
the
that'll be really
vote?
helpful. I'm sorry, it was 3 in favor and 15 opposed for Rubenstein, and it was 9 in favor and 5 opposed for Warren. 9-5-7 for Warren, 3-15-3 for Rubenstein.
The abstains should be noted.
Pardon?
The abstentions should be noted.
Yes, in this case, definitely, yes. And it'll all be, Lisa will get this sheet after the meeting. All right, well, so thank you. We're done with warrant article 8 for now. And the next time it gets taken up, it'll be in a meeting that I won't be there. So we want to move on. Thank you to the petitioners. Thank you to everyone for participating in the debate and having a quite elaborate conversation. We need to move on to 2 other items. There was a select board change to warrant article 9 for on the renter's handbook. I'm not sure who here is best qualified to explain that particular proposal. Paul.
Oh.
Yes, it's a full night.
Yes, it is. We still have Mr. Trump to talk about.
Boy, I don't miss these days. Okay, so let me get my head together. So this is it's in your packet as the Warren amendment. It's not the Warren amendment. The select board had multiple constables come to our public hearing, and when we ended up voting on it, they spoke again, and they raised a number of issues. And during the first public hearing we had, during our deliberations, the board agreed that we should, amend the article. I took on the amendment, sent it around and got all the clearance and everything. So it got the Warren amendment, but it really it's the select board motion. It makes a narrow change. It removes the requirement that town agents, including Brookline constables, deliver a Brookline specific statement of tenants' rights when serving a notice. So it removes the agents or the constables having to deliver this notice. The select board's motion preserves the goal of warrant Article 9, ensuring tenants have access to information while maintaining alignment with state law and avoiding unintended effects, which I'll discuss. The select board voted unanimously, 5-0, to recommend favorable action on the amended article that you have in front of you. The petitioners, in their, I think it's a rebuttal, offer several observations in support of retaining and delivering the requirement. I'd like to speak to those for a moment. However, these points do not address the core structural issue that the select board motion seeks to correct, which is who is legally required to provide notice and to produce the required information consistent with state law. The key issue is not whether a landlord finds it easy or not burdensome to add pages to the packet, which is what the petitioners are suggesting. The key issue is that Article 9 does not follow state law, which holds the landlord responsible for providing the notice to quit and relevant documentation, including tenant resource information that is developed heavily by the state. The petitioners have cited that landlords' compliance with Boston's requirements is proof that it's easy for them to do because Boston does also offer local resources. The reason that there is high compliance with Boston landlords, is because Boston requires that the landlord provide the information which is consistent with state law's notice to quit. Somerville and Cambridge also require the landlord to provide local tenant resources. So Boston, Somerville, and Cambridge all require the landlord to provide the information. Article 9 does not require the landlord to provide Brookline's rental handbook. It requires the constables or other agent of the town to provide this information, departing from what the practices is of the municipalities around us that have significant rental housing. The petitioners reference the relatively small number of evictions for September in their rebuttal. It's important to note that these are not the number of notices to quit. The notices to quit are not entered into the system of record that the petitioners are referencing. According to Constable Figler, who I believe he's on tonight and spoke extensively at a select board meeting, there are many more notices to quit, and maybe in the hundreds, that are not entered into the system. It's at the time of the notice to quit, which is really important. This is a very important point, that the information that Brookline can offer would be helpful to the tenant. The notice to quit is the first thing that happens and is required by state law. This is why the state requires that tenant resources be provided at the time of the notice to quit, and that by the petitioner's own admission, the few documented cases that they have in September, half were noticed by Brookline constables and the others by other parties. The petitioners emphasize that dismissals solely due to local notice issues may be uncommon. However, the amendment does not claim that dismissals are frequent. It notes that when a notice is challenged, the person who served it, meaning the Brookline constable, may be compelled to testify. If Brookline adds a required document, the constables must testify about whether it was delivered correctly. Town council may be pulled in, incurring costs for the town into litigation to defend the policy or the materials produced. And importantly, constables won't receive any compensation for doing this. They would have to just go in for the court time. The amendment importantly does, preserve the purpose of Article 9, which is to ensure that tenants have access to local resources and know their rights, while maintaining consistency with state eviction procedures, avoiding structural incentives that push landlords away from Brookline. So remember, a landlord can choose who they're using to provide this notice. If a landlord isn't required by state law, right, to provide it, and Brookline's not requiring the landlord to send the notice with Brookline's local resources, the landlord's not going to use us. We've heard this from Joe Figler. They're going to go somewhere else, and they just will bypass, and the information won't get into the hands of the renter anyway. And it's really important. The petitioners have said this repeatedly. They would prefer to require the landlord do it. They want the landlord to do it, but they think it's illegal for them to put it into our bylaws. So they're trying to do this end run and convince people to do it. There's a whole bunch of other people, sheriffs and others, that will have no reason to do it for us on our behalf. There's no way to do it. There's no fine for them to do it if they're not compliant. So as I mentioned, the select board supported this motion. It's in front of you, 5-0. And I hope that you would support the amendment so that we can move forward with having renters' information up on our website and figuring out in the future how to get landlords to deliver the material, which they should be delivering anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Constable Gordon.
Yeah, so I abstained before. I have a direct financial interest here in this particular matter. I just as soon wait and see where the debate goes and
Okay.
comment on the facts if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'd also I know this is not a public hearing, but I think that we should, if he wishes to do so, hear from Constable Figler.
Sure. That'd be perfectly fine, Mr. Figler.
Hi. So I'm not sure. I mean, here I am. So I was probably gonna comment after Alec had a chance to respond to Paul, because I know he wrote, a letter in rebuttal to what, Paul was saying.
Okay.
But if you wanted me to just speak now, I could. Whatever's makes most sense for you.
All right. You can hold off, and we can go to our discussion, and then come back to you later. Alec.
Actually, you're moving Alec ahead of Anthony.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see Anthony. Go ahead, Anthony, and then
Should
Alec.
the petitioner be allowed to say anything?
The petitioner, we're wasting time discussing who's going to go first or second. And actually, I don't really care, but to keep going back and forth on it, like you just did, Susan, and like I'm doing now, is a complete and total waste of time. So flip a coin, it doesn't matter. Alec, you are the petitioner, go first.
All right, thank you, Harry. I just wanted to briefly respond to Paul's opening comments there. I want to push back on the notion that this is a small change and that this amendment maintains the spirit and purpose of Warrant Article 9. The petitioners of Warrant Article 9 do not agree with that characterization at all. One of the two main provisions of this article is the tenant notification program, and standing that program up, albeit in an incremental fashion, as we've said all along. This amendment would completely strip these provisions out. And what we would be left with is a bylaw that would solely call for the town to create the statement and put it on the website, but then not actually deploy it or start to stand up a notification program. We fundamentally see this as an irrevocable change to the article and a big step backwards. Ironically, we are actually advocating in this case that Brookline follow the letter of the law as our town council has laid it out for us and ruled. The select board made very clear at their hearing that their preference would be that the landlords provide notification. As we heard from Paul tonight, he sees this as aligning Brookline's bylaw with state law. As we discussed at length in our initial hearing with the advisory committee, the petitioners in theory agree. And in an ideal world, we would have designed this article in that way. However, we were advised both by town council and by several other attorneys we independently consulted with that this would not survive Attorney General review. And in fact, in being struck down in Attorney General review, would then jeopardize the programs set up in Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Malden, and other communities, potentially impacting thousands of eviction cases beyond Brookline's borders. We are leading in this case under a first principle of do no harm, and we have serious concerns that to defer the notification provisions here with the idea of in the future bringing a landlord notification requirement has the potential to do great harm beyond our borders. And I'd also say that we don't see this as an end run. As I mentioned, this is how, unfortunately, we have to grapple with the letter of the law because Brookline is not a city. Our bylaw will face automatic legal review, and if it doesn't survive, as I mentioned, we would have an adverse outcome. In addition, in looking at the other available legal options, we consulted after our last meeting with the select board with some legal services attorneys who have worked in providing legal representation in eviction cases for multiple decades in the region. They mentioned that an alternative might involve more intensive use of town staff. We don't want to see that be the outcome here, but if town meeting decides that we can't place what we think is a fairly modest burden on noticing agents, that will really be the only feasible path forward for Brookline. That will be more resource intensive. That will consume more staff time. And the petitioners think that what we've put forward and what the advisory committee previously voted to recommend favorable action on by a margin of 18-1 represents not only the legal path forward, but also the cost-effective and cost-conscious path forward. And I do want to note, in looking at some of the data that Paul referenced that we produced in our response, looking at actual eviction filings in Brookline, we actually saw filings where Brookline landlords were employing non-Brookline constables, outside party noticing agents, to provide notice to quits in September. Those noticing agents, in the notice to quit packets they delivered to tenants, included Boston's local statement of tenants' rights as a matter of best practice for their individual private servicing activities. So right now, ironically, with the lack of this kind of bylaw and program, Brookline residents that get served a notice to quit from an outside party may be getting better informed of their rights and potentially legal and other resources available to them if they're served by someone other than a Brookline constable. This is something that we have the power to directly remedy through bylaw. As I've said, this represents an incremental approach. We acknowledge there's more work to do. We will, should this pass, seek voluntary compliance with the Norfolk County Sheriff's Department and look to another future bylaw to potentially regulate other third-party private noticing agents in Brookline. This is the first step of several. But as I say, we strongly feel that this not only represents the legally safe path forward, but the more cost-effective path forward as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Dennis, Mr. Figler would like to speak. Do I call him now or do we wait?
You can go first.
I had called on him as a constable, and I see Regina has also raised her hand. I'd like to hear very brief comments from both of them before, and we can go back to other questions from the body.
All right. So for those who don't know, my name is Joe Figler. I'm the senior most constable in the town. I have experience serving notice not just in Brookline, but in Boston as well. I've served over 150 notices to quit in Brookline and over 250 in Boston. So I'm very familiar with both ways of doing things, right? And so the first thing that just pops into my head is that Alec had mentioned that when a non-Brookline constable had served a notice to quit in the 9 summary processes that he looked at, that they included, the tenant information from Boston, and that was a best practice. That's not true. That's not a best practice. That's just something that happened to be done. And I can say from experience that I've done that too, but that's not a best practice. That's essentially what either a lawyer or a property manager, or whoever hired me or the process server to serve the notice, asked us to do, so we did it. but it's not a best practice. So I just wanted to clarify that. And to understand how this all works and why it's an issue about, you know, how the notice is served. First, you serve a notice to quit. Typically, it's 30 days. Then you serve a summary process. And then when you serve the summary process, a week after, it gets filed with the court. So when Alec was looking online at the court website that details the summary processes in September, like if you actually look at when those notices to quit were served, you had one in April, you had one in June, you had 6 in July and 1 in August, right? So what he looked at wasn't representative of the notices to quit that were served in September. What he looked at was when those notices to quit were filed with the court. Now, again, if you just look at the numbers, I'm serving about 15 notices a month, notices to quit a month in Brookline, you know, probably 20 or so in Boston, just to give a ballpark. And so of the 158 notices to quit that I've served in Brookline, 54, I've served 54 summary processes. The next step is a tier 1, which is I've served 45 of those. And then after all that, it eventually gets to an eviction. And then at that point, there were 21 evictions that I was asked to serve. And of the 21, only 14 moved forward, right? So if you're actually talking about actual numbers, these are my actual numbers that I've done, right? Not hypothetical, not somebody told me this is what's happened, right? And so in every case, the onus is always on the landlord to make sure that the proper documentation is given to me for me to serve. That's how it works. And as we've already discussed, and as Paul mentioned, and as Alec mentioned, the right way to do it is you put the onus on the landlord, right? And then he's responsible to make sure that the proper documentation is served. I execute that as a constable, but it's his responsibility because he's the one filing the claim with the courts, right? Not me, not anyone else. He is, or she, whichever the case may be. But it's the landlord's responsibility to make sure that everything goes the right way, right? Because again, they have to prove it in court, right? When you start to mess around with that and you try to put the responsibility on a Brookline constable, for one, there are loopholes with that, which Alec and Paul alluded to, right? To serve a notice to quit, all you have to do is be over the age of 18 and disinterested. That's it, right? So anyone from outside of Brookline or whatever can serve a notice to quit, right? That's not the case for a summary process or anything else, but for a notice to quit, that's all you got to do, right? So if you actually had a bad actor who wanted to circumvent the rules that Alex is trying to put in place, they easily could do that, right? It's very simple, you know, and what isn't being talked about is effectively what's going on is you're creating inequity, right? You're putting an unfair burden on Brookline constables compared to non, right? And for the tenants, any tenant receiving these notices from a Brookline constable is going to have more access to resources that a tenant who's not getting them won't, right? To me, that just seems clear. And for me, I have a hard time co-signing on this type of warrant article when we know what we're putting forward isn't the best option. We all agree the best option is put the onus on the landlord. And I understand we can't, right? Because town council says it's illegal, right? And I appreciate the fact that Alec does not want to jeopardize Boston and Somerville and Cambridge. I get it. I understand it, you know, and to me, that makes sense, right? Because he's looking at bigger picture. But at the end of the day, I just have a hard time going forward with an article that we know is not the best. And I find it hard for anyone to say that the most cost-effective way to do this is to put an onus on a constable to do it, where more likely than not, we're going to charge more for it, right? And so who pays for it? Whoever hires us is going to pay for it, right? Likely the landlord. But
Joe,
who
can you finish
ultimately
up,
pays
please?
for it, right? It's trickle down, the tenants. You know, so you got to keep the whole thing in mind. And from my perspective, the most important thing is to make this information available to the tenants. And if you follow what the select board said, it does make the information available to the tenants. I understand Alec doesn't like it because he wants us to serve him. I get it. I appreciate it. Right. And from my
Joe?
perspective, it's more important that the tenants have the information available as opposed to going through a process that we know is not the best way to do it. And that's fundamentally where we disagree. I think anyone who's reasonable will agree that they
Joe?
should have a renter's handbook, but
I'm sorry I had to mute you. I've been trying to ask you to finish up. Eric, can we move on, please?
So next is Regina.
Thank you, Dennis and Harry. I'll try and accommodate the brevity. I'm really disturbed that Alec just said that it's really cost effective to do this, but it won't be for the constable or for whoever does the service. It will not be cost effective. We'll end up everybody has agreed that I've talked to that the tenants are statistically very likely to say, I never got it. That means the server, whoever that happens to be, has to go to court, sometimes multiple times. Who's going to compensate the constables for that, or the servers, whoever they are? So that's point one. I don't think that's good government here for people who are trying to do the job and already have a bond that we pay for. And then I don't know what this will add to it. The second point is we like to use the word equity in Brookline, but if you're saying voluntary for the sheriffs, why aren't you saying voluntary for us? I have talked to the constables. They're more than happy to do this presentation. The damage that is likely is based on the mandated version of it, Alec, rather than the voluntary that you were willing to give other servers. So the only ones who are going to be at risk are going to be the Brookline constables. That just is not equitable right there. So if you would be willing to do the amendment to size it down to voluntary for even the Brookline constables, I think you'll get 100% cooperation for it, because all of us have compassion for this situation. So those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give Alec the benefit of a two-finger before I go to Neil, the other constable who's here.
Thanks so much, Harry. I'll be as brief as possible. I completely appreciate both, where Mr. Figler and Ms. Frawley are coming from, and I have appreciated their input in this process. To briefly address some of the points that were brought up, I do trust our current constables, and I am confident that a voluntary, ask that this be delivered would be fulfilled by our current constables. But as we've discussed with previous bylaw proposals, this is an elected position. We have no idea who the future constables of Brookline will be. And I think if this is something we think is valuable, establishing it as a requirement by bylaw provides more certainty, particularly given the fact that this is an elected position and one that is subject to some turnover. Fundamentally, I also want to push back a bit on the notion that without these notification provisions, tenants will still get this information. There's a reason all these other communities have not only created this local resource, but also stood up notification programs. And it's because, yes, many tenants will proactively access this resource on the town website, but many won't. And many won't even be aware of its existence until they get that notice to quit or that initial eviction filing. And making sure that the tenant gets that resource at that point is absolutely critical. And it really speaks to what an effective notification program should be. And to us, I think for the petitioner's perspective, this really boils down to a fundamental question, which is, should Brookline tenants be afforded this protection that is provided as standard to tenants in Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville, as well as other communities beyond that? This is the fundamental question here. And we acknowledge right up front, this will not reach all tenants initially. But as to the question of why we're seeking voluntary compliance from the sheriff's department rather than our local constables, we have the authority to regulate Brookline officials by bylaw. We have no legal authority to regulate the county government. So that necessitates voluntary compliance. This is all downstream of the legal ruling that we're working within. But we have identified where the challenge points are, and I'm confident that with our strong relationship with the county, as well as our future legal exploration of expanding this bylaw, we will get to a place where we have a very comprehensive program stood up. And finally, my last point, I just want to clarify this notion that's been brought up about the potential for constables being called into court more frequently. As I mentioned, we consulted with some legal services professional attorneys that operate in Greater Boston and have done so for the last 3 decades, including the last decade, which is when these notification programs have really been stood up. And as was reported to us by these experts who work in these courts every day, to their knowledge, and this includes the knowledge of their institution, no case has ever been dismissed or even faced an adverse ruling due to the lack of delivery of a locally required notice, which from our perspective and from the legal advice that we received makes it a highly dubious prospect that Brookline constables will have new burdens for court time placed on them. So we are very confident that this is a workable solution, albeit the first step in a larger process, but I'll conclude there. And I just want to thank everyone again for their contribution.
Thank you so much. Neil Gordon, the other.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. I want to point out one minor matter that Joe Figler and I disagree on. It's not a matter that really matters, but I raise it anyway. If from my point of view, if a bylaw requires me to provide notice to a tenant, I'm charging the town for that. That's not something that the landlord is asking me to do. I'm just saying, somebody's going to pay us. We're not doing that for free. I want to go down through and raise some rebuttal to Alex's most recent response, and I'll take them in the order that they come. And they speak to this expert, the housing attorney who represents tenants. Well, that particular unnamed attorney doesn't represent me, doesn't represent any of the other constables, and doesn't represent the town. All right, and that advice I take with a serious grain of salt. I've had conversations with our town council regarding the potential for a dismissal based on a failure to deliver. Next is this indication that landlords don't find this in Boston and the other communities especially burdensome. It's not the weight of the package that's being delivered that is the burden. They risk a fine if they don't comply. It was a point that was made at the select board meeting on Tuesday. They comply because there's a serious fine if they don't comply. The separate, I don't know whether this particular attorney is aware of issues having been raised, that there's no dismissal or adverse ruling is beside the point. I've been called to court more than once because a tenant denies having received notice. And you know, that doesn't happen on a phone call. That happens when I get called into court and under oath testify what it is I did. And I don't get compensated by the town for that. You know, it's my time and it's disruptive time. And so I don't know. The landlord also says, well, it's likely the landlord failed to comply with the state required disclosures too. I'm sorry, the attorney, that the landlord failed to comply. Well, that's great, because that's just going to give me someone to sit next to in the courtroom, right? That doesn't take me off the hook. Joe addressed this busy month for evictions, and this eviction term is bandied about often. Eviction is the final end of process. It's a long process. There are a lot of notices in between. There are lots of opportunities for resolution, including with the landlord and between the landlord and the tenant. There's resolution. There's plenty of time for tenants in most cases to make arrangements for other housing. The number of actual evictions pales compared to the number of cases that begin. And as I said when this Warren article came up the first time, almost all of my cases have this most significant number, right, have been significant non-payment of rent beyond what this is not a sort of medical issue. I missed 2 weeks work and missed 2 weeks pay. It's not that. It's 2 months, 3 months, 4 months of rent. None of those have been Brookline Housing Authority, by the way. 2 of them have been Brookline Community Development Corp. And maybe 1 or 2 Caritas Communities. None of them have been evil tenants. We go on to this 61 and 65 page long notice to quit. The notice to quit is a letter. If there's a contract involved, it'll be attached. If that contract is 57 pages, so be it. The constables serve what the client gives us. Sometimes it's the landlord. If there's a counterclaim, it could be the tenant serving the landlord. It's not a problem because it's 65 pages and what's another 4 or 5 pages. That's not how it works. And if there is a reason for a landlord not to use a Brookline constable mandated to give information to a tenant, I have no problem with the tenant being advised of the tenant's rights. The landlord may feel differently about that. And the landlord may just go elsewhere. I'm almost done. I mean, Joe mentioned, this noticing agencies included, the noticing agents included the local statement, even from the wrong community. The noticing agents serve the package that's given them. It's delivered, and there's proof of delivery, right? We don't determine what goes in the package that gets delivered, whether it be to a tenant or a defendant or anybody else. Agreed, a local statement of rights would provide information on Brooklyn-based resources. Yes, of course. But again, we hear that it's burdensome. It's a burden to somebody. And I really am almost done.
Why don't we come back to you?
Last comment, as to this minimal burden that would be placed on town staff, if it's all that easy to find out what eviction actions are taking place in court, my goodness, I saw Chaz Carey's reaction to the limited unfunded mandate that would be placed on his staff, right? If it's all that little effort, then somebody please do it on a volunteer basis.
Thank you, Neil. Going to members of the committee now. Anthony Buono.
Hi, do we still have town council on?
Yes, we do.
We do. Awesome. I have a question for town council. Can you just give me a little bit of the background on the legal explanation of why we can't mandate the landlord to do this?
Sure, and that comes from the Home Rule Amendment that's to the Constitution. And there's limitations on what authority towns can do. And one of them is create civil law due to the private relationship, and specifically in landlord-tenant law. The classic case on that is Marshall House versus the town of Brookline, where in 1970, rent control was first passed as a local bylaw and challenged in court and struck down through Marshall House. The next year, the legislature came through and said, we're going to allow rent control statewide. And that's why we were able to have rent control from 1970 until the 90s when, again, under state law, an initiative petition took it away. So it's a limitation on home rule authority.
Gotcha. And then the quick follow-up is then why would us mandating passing doing a home rule to do this threaten like Boston's ability to do it? Like how does that connect? Maybe, yeah. Do you understand that?
Yes. So Brookline is a town, so our bylaws are approved by the AG's office. Cities such as Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Medford, their ordinances, what their bylaws are called, do not get subject to AG's approval. So I hear lots of times, but Cambridge does it, but Somerville does it, right? They don't have the review that we have. So they may pass something at the local level that doesn't get the AG review and then hasn't been, brought in court and challenged. So just because a city does it, doesn't mean the town can get away with it. So Alex's concern is if we were to pass it, a town, it go to the AG's office and the AG disapproves it, you've now just called into question all the city ordinances that have never gone through that review.
And the AG's office would disapprove of it based off the relationship that a local community can't regulate the relationship between tenant and landlord?
Yep, they would absolutely, they would 99% chance cite Marshall House versus the town of Brookline.
Gotcha.
This is, that's the classic case on this area of law.
Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Granoff.
Yes, so I appreciate the comments by the constables, and I'm wondering why we were never given statements when we had our public hearing and our 2 public meetings about this warrant article. The only constable who showed up was Neil Gordon, and he in fact was the person who drafted this version of the warrant article that was a stripped down version of the original warrant article. And it would have been very helpful and I think informative at an earlier point in this process to get all of this really useful feedback. But going forward, I do think that there's a value to having the town create a document that's Brookline specific, that can be published on our website, that would include not only the information about the legal aspects of the eviction process and the rights of tenants, but most importantly, have a clear and concise statement about the resources that a Brookline tenant could turn to at the moment when they're being handed an eviction notice, or just in general to know about their rights. Because simply giving someone a Massachusetts document with generalized generic information about statewide agencies that might be helpful is not going to be particularly helpful to a Brookline tenant who's on the verge of eviction. So I think that there's a real value to one part of this warrant article, and that is the creation of a 6 to 8 page statement that would be easily downloadable as a PDF from the town website. But I don't think that that's a substitute for having a requirement that this information, particularly the resource information that state law doesn't cover. And as far as I know, there's no requirement of any landlord to deliver information to Brookline tenants about the Brookline specific resources that they could consult to provide for help at this particularly vulnerable moment of their being handed an eviction notice. So I think that there is a lot more that can be done and should be done in the future. The question is, what do we do now? We have spent a lot of time going over various incarnations of this document. We were not aware that the select board was going to provide a very different approach. And we have been appreciative to be informed of that as well. So we could have taken that into account. But at this point, I have a question for the petitioner. Do they see value in going forward with the version that the select board has presented, considering the extreme opposition that apparently a lot of Brookline constables seem to have, which they're now expressing tonight? Or is there something, or do you want to go forward with the advisory committee version? which was originally drafted by Constable Gordon.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Susan. The petitioners of warrant Article 9 feel that the notification provisions of this article are absolutely paramount to its purpose and spirit. We will intend to move the version that the advisory committee previously voted favorable action on, regardless of what happens tonight with our vote on the warrant amendment. We will, I would imagine, recommend favorable action at town meeting for whatever the main motion ends up being, but we would still be moving the motion that we had previously considered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Regina, quick comment.
Thank you. Yes, very quick. I agree with what Neil had to say. I have to say I'm deeply offended and concerned that Alec is willing to take the good faith of the Norfolk Sheriff's Office that they're likely to do it, but in our case, mandating it. And he shows zero interest that we are going to be, we, the constables, and ultimately, therefore, the town will be exposed legally. Because we will, what Alec had said was what the final decision-making of the judge. What Neil was trying to say is there's a process before that, and we're going to have to show up in court to say we did serve it, and we're not going to be compensated for it, but we could be very heavily legally liable. So that's what I really wanted people to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis, that seems to be the end of the list. That seems to be the end of the comments from committee members. If you want to describe what's going to happen going forward and or give Paul a chance to sum up now, that's your call.
So we'll give Paul a chance in a second. I think what makes the most sense, given that the proposal from Mr. Warren is essentially a substitute motion, that we would be better off having a motion to replace our recommendation, given that we passed the original motion 18 to 1 to 8, something like that, that we should entertain a motion to replace our recommendation of favorable action on the original motion with a recommendation of favorable action on the select board motion. And either that will pass and that will become our recommendation, or it will fail and we will continue with our recommendation of favorable action on the original. That's what I think makes the most sense for us to do, rather than reconsidering, putting the motion on the table, considering the amendment, voting it up or down, and then taking another vote, given how overwhelming our original position was. So with that in mind, Mr. Warren, if you have a summary before we go to a vote.
Yep. Thank you. And thank you for all of your work on a late night. I just wanted to remind you, it keeps being called the Warren Amendment. You know, and I'm not sure why
I called it the select board motion.
No, I know, but someone else. I don't know why the constables didn't show up at the AC's subcommittee's hearing. I don't know. I will tell you that that the amendment that the select board adopted and unanimously supports the motion of the amended article, is in direct response to the feedback from we listened to the constables. They showed up at our public hearing. And from there, I was directed by the board to go ahead, figure out what the amendment is. And it was filed immediately and sent to the advisory committee, Lisa Portier, and then, to every other party that it's supposed to be. So I'm not sure why you didn't hear from it, Susan, and we can look at the process. But again, the select board felt really strongly that the issues that were raised by the constables, as well as the challenging that's going to happen with potentially divergent information being developed and published, was enough to warrant an amendment to the article, and then in the future figuring out how we can move forward. With a process that could work for tenants, especially. So anyway, I'll leave it to
Thank you.
Leave you to it. Thank you.
We didn't show up, by the way, to answer the question factually, because we were never invited. I was never informed that this was happening. And I only noticed it shortly before the selectmen's meeting, and I notified the other constables that this is going to be heard. We had no idea it was heard at your subcommittees. Thank you.
So Dennis, if you need a motion,
Yeah,
I
I need
will-
I would like a motion that we replace our recommendation of favorable action on warrant article. What number are we on?
Nine.
Thank you. Warrant Article 9 with a recommendation of favorable action on the select board motion. If that passes, that will become our recommendation. If it fails, we will preserve our original 18-1 recommendation of favorable action on the petitioner's motion as modified by the subcommittee process.
So moved.
Okay.
Amend by substitution. I'm sorry, motion, replace recommendation of on warrant article 9 to favorable action on select board motion. Thank you for your indulgence. So do we understand that if we're voting yes, we're going with the select board? If we're voting no, we are preserving our recommendation of favorable action on warrant article 9, but a different version. And I realize that affects at least the one person who voted no or abstained before. Michael.
I don't see him on.
Oh, sorry. Cliff.
Abstain.
Anthony.
You gotta come back to me.
Okay, fine. This is a hard one. Harry.
Yes.
Neil.
I have a conflict. I abstain.
Okay, Susan.
I abstain.
This is going to be interesting. Perry.
No.
Kelly.
I'm abstaining.
Lisa.
Yes.
Janice.
I'm abstaining.
Well, I'm beginning to regret my decision because I realize our final vote is going to be a very strange one. It would probably be better if I pretend this didn't happen, because we're going to have no good solid recommendation for a write-up. We should, given the number of abstentions, I think we would have to reconsider and take the select board amendment as an amendment, and then
Dennis,
vote up
maybe
or
you
down
should-
to have a vote.
Dennis, maybe you should remind people about what you said about the abstentions at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, well, I think I am realizing that I'd simply made a mistake, because the preference for the select board motion relative to the original motion is less interesting than our recommendation on the concept of the overall article. I just made a mistake. I would like a motion for reconsideration, and then we will take up the topics independently.
I would move for reconsideration.
Second.
I apologize.
Sorry.
Warrant Article 9. So I'm going to go back. Cliff. This is a motion for reconsideration of warrant
Yes,
article 9.
yes.
Sorry. Anthony.
Yes.
Harry.
Yes.
Neil.
Abstain.
Susan.
Abstain.
Perry.
No.
Kelly.
Yes.
Elisa.
Yes.
Janice.
No.
Brian.
Yes.
Alec.
No.
Carol. Liz.
I think we've lost.
A bunch of people. Jocelyn. Well, we have more fun. to
Actually,
come.
Liz is here. She's on mute.
Okay, well, if she speaks up, Jocelyn,
No.
Linda,
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
Carlos,
No.
Margaret,
No.
Lee,
I think we have lost Lee.
Christine.
Abstain.
Sorry, Dennis, I want to change my vote to no.
Okay, well,
And I'm going to change
Go ahead.
my vote to no.
Jesus Christ.
And
Sorry.
you can put me in for abstain.
This was a hard
Sorry,
one.
I couldn't. I know it's very. It's
So just given that we're going to have no, we're going to have no opinion on the select board motion.
Dennis, if I'm not, this means the original recommendation would stand, yes, because we voted.
Yes, the original recommendation will stand, but we will have nothing in our report about our opinion on the select board motion as of. What I was hoping to achieve here was the opportunity for us to have taken a substantive vote on the select board motion one way or the other, and then
What
take an
is the
opinion.
vote?
This is a substantive vote,
It's
isn't
so
it? Because-
tiny, I can't read it. What is the vote?
This is the motion to reconsider warrant
I know,
article
but how
9.
did it come out?
Oh, it's 7 in favor, 8 opposed, and 3 abstentions, which
That's
means
all
we're
those
not
people
going to.
changing their votes. Ugh.
Yes,
Right.
which means
So
we're going to have no
Dennis-
opinion. Yes.
When the presentation is down or on the report, we can just say that we heard
Yes,
the
that's what we'll
select
do.
board. Right. And we decided not to reconsider.
That's correct. That's what we will do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Well, be sure
All
to
right.
mention that you first started the vote and then you canceled it because it wasn't going the way you thought.
No, it's
Please add
entirely
that to your
procedural.
report.
We can do that, Paul.
Okay.
My goal was to try to get us to a point where we could take a substantive vote, not because and have an opinion from the advisory committee that had a weight behind it, rather than a vote of one in favor or 2 opposed and 19 abstentions. That doesn't mean anything at town
So
meeting.
Dennis, I just want to make sure, so when we go back, because I assume the board's going to take this up again next week. So it was 7-8-3 was the reconsideration.
Yes,
7 yes, 8 no, 3 abstentions.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I apologize for making. My goal was to get us to
You
a
don't
point
need
where we
to
could take a
apologize.
substantive vote.
And 11 absences.
Yes, and
Yeah,
11
everybody
absences.
left.
We can say that is right because they're coming. They nobody wants to take on the next topic. Do we have a subcommittee report, Cliff?
No, we don't have a subcommittee report, and the reason we do not have a subcommittee report is that given the travel schedules and given the difficulty, it's sort of like the timing, I just decided to work with the petitioner. And I had contacted Alec in case I needed some moral support. But I think everyone has gotten the rewrite.
Okay.
I did not include a marked up version because frankly there wouldn't have been much left of the original. And I'm just going to turn over to John so that he can explain or talk about the changes and we can go from there.
Yeah, and so that would be great. And if John, if you could try to focus on how this article incorporates the feedback that came from our last discussion, I think that would really help this body.
But has everyone read it? Has anyone read it?
I haven't
Okay,
read it.
because it's probably worth skimming as John is talking because it is substantially different, and I personally think it actually does what people wanted it to do.
Go ahead, John.
I'm going to speak briefly, so you may not have a chance to skim very much. This article started with the idea of calling upon the responsible officials, which is to say the vice president and the members of the cabinet, to exercise their authority under the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump from office. Both the members of the select board and this committee made a powerful case that that was simply not going to happen. So where the article is now is that it expresses Brookline's, I would say, well, I guess, hostile feelings toward the status of our political condition, where there is no practical prospect of either the 25th Amendment or the power to impeach being applied at a time when there is at best substantial doubt as to Donald Trump's ability to complete to carry out his duties as the president. And that's what it's really become an article about where we are politically in the nation, not so much about the specifics of what Mr. Trump has done. So that if you look at the second page of the article, the specifics, which of course are including but not limited to, so there may be other things. There might, for instance, you might consider the video that Mr. Trump released after the No King's Day demonstrations that I suspect most or all of you have seen. This was drafted too early to include the wholesale destruction, excuse me, of the East Wing of the White House with no permits, no review or anything like that. And not to mention the apparent plan to name the edifice after himself. So that's what we really are.
All right. Thank you. Questions or comments from the committee?
And Anthony has well done. Yes, he has a comment too.
I just want to say I wasn't in support of the article originally. After reading it, I think it's perfect, exactly what needs to be said, and completely is in line with the position I think Brookline should take. So well done.
Alec.
I would just agree as well, and I just wanted to add my appreciation for the immense amount of work that the petitioners have put into this, and producing, I think at this point, 4 or 5 different versions based on a lot of feedback that they've heard from this committee and the subcommittee and others. So I think it's very apropos. It's very something town meeting should consider, and I'm looking forward to supporting it. So thank you.
I think we're ready for a motion.
All right, I guess I'll let Cliff make the motion.
Well, okay, I will move favorable action on warrant article 19 as amended.
I will second.
All right. So at the end of a long evening, we're voting on whether to recommend favorable action on warrant article 19 as amended. And I guess we're starting with Cliff.
Abstain.
Anthony.
Yes.
Harry F.
Yes.
Dave, Neil.
Neil, yes.
I'm sorry, the screen is so wide now. I can't see the names anymore. Neil, yes. Susan.
Yes.
Yes.
Perry.
Yes.
Kelly. Well, I lost Kelly.
I
so-
think we've lost Kelly.
Elisa. We lost.
I think we have lost Elisa.
Janice.
I'm still here. Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Alec.
Yes.
Liz.
She's muted.
Okay. Jocelyn.
Yes.
Linda. Fran.
No.
Do we have a quorum? Carlos. I don't know if we have quorum.
10,
Generally,
11.
unless somebody calls for a quorum vote, the
No.
quorum continues to
Okay.
exist till the end of the
All right.
meeting.
Great. Okay. Carlos?
He's not on the list.
Margaret?
Not on the list.
Christine?
Well, I called him President Crazy in class, so yes.
And who did I miss?
Liz,
who
I
was-
think, looked like she was here, but muted.
Is Liz still here?
She's still on the list. She's still muted.
All right. Well, we have a 10 to 1 vote. Take that for then I'll let Cliff, you're going to have to write this up as it stands, or whoever on the subcommittee does.
There's something slightly ironic about voting on a warrant article that's about defending democracy in its substance, and then half the people
Not having a
voting on it
quorum.
not being
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I mean, you could add
We
a, you
have
could add
a
a,
quorum until somebody calls for a count, Dennis.
yes. Yes.
Under
Thank you.
Robert's rules.
Thank you. I point well taken, but I still think Anthony's point is a worthy of note. Harry, you have any announcements? Thank you,
yes.
everybody. I know this is a late night, and I will have fun at town meeting because I'm not going to see you.
Just a
You
question.
seem devastated by that, Dennis.
You
Good
can't even
luck.
imagine.
Good luck, Dennis.
Susan Granoff, are you still going to be able to do warrant article 9 speaking at town meeting? I assume yes, since we didn't change our vote.
Yes, as long as I can show up as long as I'm healthy enough to show up in person.
Okay, I mean, you can also zoom in if you're
Yeah.
not. Cliff, do we still think Elise is going to be the speaker for?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
okay. And anybody want to take a guess on whether David Pollock can be the speaker on the lighting article, given that we've now decided to refer it? I'll send him an email.
I think he probably still should be, and then we'll
Okay.
then we'll see.
So we may have a meeting on the night of town meeting. I'm hoping we don't, but we probably will. And speaking on behalf of everybody, wish Dennis the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we all
Be
do.
well, Dennis.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. And good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Night.